Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
And we are broadcasting.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, November 6, 2021, and this is a special meeting of the Pinole City Council that I am calling to order. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in honor of the U.S. military troops? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. And Madam City Clerk, may I please have roll call?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Martinez-Rubin.
Good morning, here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salini.
Here.
Councilmember Tave.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy. And a note for the record that he's not with us. And Councilmember Toms.
Here.
Noting for the record that City Manager Murray is absent. City Attorney Kasher.
Here.
Assistant City Manager De La Rosa.
Here.
Mayor and Council, the agenda was posted on Thursday, November 4th at 2 p.m. No written comments were received on the agenda item today. Does the Council have any conflicts to report on our agenda item? Seeing none, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, it's an opportunity for the public to make comments. Citizens to be heard is the agenda item. People may join us either directly on this Zoom webinar, with the ID number 893-3500-0272, or by phone, dialing 1-669-900-6833. I will open a public comment period, and if you are on using Zoom, you will be using the raise hand feature. If you are on the phone, you will be pressing *9 to alert staff that you'd like to comment, and after commenting, you're going to be pressing *6 to unmute once you're called on. Oh, pardon me, that'll allow you to comment. So I will turn to Ms. Stone and ask about who is on queue for public comments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We have David and Irma report.
And when we see, sometimes we see entries on the screen as to how people have indicated their identification on Zoom. As those of you who are familiar, you enter your name to identify yourself. When we see two people, we are asking, actually it's going to be one person that's going to be allowed to speak. And so in this example, we will have either one of the people that are listed as Ruperts and then a different person if they choose to speak. So thank you.
Thank
Who
you.
will we be hearing this morning?
And Mr. or Mrs. Report, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Irma Report. About 5 minutes ago, the website went down, so maybe there's people having problems coming back on. I got you on my phone, but now that you're back on live, just a little, reminder that some people might be coming back on. So thank you, Mayor and Council. Good morning. The only thing I want to bring up this morning is at the last council meeting, we spoke about Station 74 and sending a letter to our supervisor, Joya, and the county supervisors who will be having a meeting about Measure X funds for Station 74. If you are sending a letter, let's start promoting it to the citizens. Do a petition, do a letter drive, put something on next door, let's sign it, forward it to the supervisors before the 16th of November. Let's not wait till the last minute. I know it's hard, we're all, everybody's working hard and busy, but let's start early. I see that the city sometimes when they're campaigning or rush to pass a measure, we're like 6 months early. At the corner of every street, there's a sign, there's a promotion. This is very important, so I'm not letting up. Let's put a petition, get all the people out there, put it in the newspaper, whatever you gotta do. Put something at the farmer's market, put a little concession thing up there, a little stand, send out flyers, pass out flyers. Whatever it takes this weekend to do, Mayor and Council, let's do a progressive campaign. We need funds in the West, funds here in the city of Pinole. Do not let up. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and you have a good day. And we will be speaking further, my husband and I, under this computer. Our other computer is down, but we'll acknowledge who's speaking, and we'll do it one at a time. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hosting this workshop. Thank you.
Cameron Sasai.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. I just wanted to once again express the need for a small business grant in our city and propose that our city uses a portion of the ARPA funding for this purpose. Our initial small business grant of $1,000 was ineffective. It did not address the many different factors that impacted each unique business in Pinole, and the grant amounts, in many cases, barely made a dent in a month's operating expense. Our city needs a round of grants that are substantial in amount and dispersed at unique levels, calculated through coefficients such as staff size, pre-pandemic, household income level of the primary business owner, years that the business has been based in the city of Pinole, demographic information of the primary business owner, and the demonstrated extent of the revenue loss since the pandemic. This would be the most efficient and equitable way to approach this issue, and many Bay Area cities have been approaching it in this way through continuity grants, even without ARPA funding. When we filter grants in these ways, we can ensure that we are adequately supporting each small business and going about this process in a way in which we are supplementing business support from the state that already exists rather than duplicating it. There was also mention from our council about a gift card initiative where residents who receive a credit to be spent at Pinole small businesses. I think that this severely misses the point. The goal is not to impact residents' propensity to consume in a local economy. This is not where the problem lies. The goal instead is to provide small businesses with an immediate fiscal stimulus that allows them to keep up with their operating costs and stay afloat, hire the necessary staff they need to reopen fully and thrive at pre-pandemic revenue levels. I strongly urge the council to allocate a portion of the ARPA funding in this way. Yes, this is about small business continuity, but even more, it's about continuing our tight-knit culture in Pinole and honoring the small businesses that have served us well for years and decades. We have not even touched on specific support for Black and Latinx businesses and other communities who have suffered disproportionately through the pandemic. So let's please pass this allocation of our ARPA funding in this way so that we can even start the conversation. Thank you.
Ms. Dawn, may I interrupt, please?
Sure.
So I know that there are other people on queue to speak. I just want to say something, that this time for citizens to be heard may be for comments that are not on the agenda. So any comment that is not, any statement that you would make during this time is for items not on the agenda. There will be an opportunity to provide comments specifically related to the ARPA funds following the presentation of that agenda item, or when we get to that. So let me read something that I omitted, and pardon me for that mistake. But regarding citizens to be heard, the time limit, as you have seen, we have a clock, and it is 3 minutes, and it's subject to modification depending on how many people we have on queue. So individuals may not share or offer time to another speaker, and pursuant to provisions of the Brown Act, no action may be taken on a matter unless it is listed on the agenda or unless certain emergency or special circumstances exist. The City Council may direct staff to investigate and or schedule certain matters for consideration at a future meeting. So there are a couple opportunities to present your comments, and at this point, during this portion of the agenda, anything that is not related to the ARPA funds is what we would want to hear. And if you have comments related to the ARPA funds, please hold on and provide those during that portion of the agenda, which will follow shortly. Thank you very much. Ms. Stone?
Yes, thank you. Rafael Menace.
Greetings, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public, and good morning as well. This is sort of a reply to Ms. Rupert's comments, which is slightly out of order, but I note that because the letter from the city is from the city as an institution, the city council, the city staff, the city as a whole, and not necessarily for individual citizens, there may be limits to what the city can do to promote public input linked to that letter. It may be worthwhile for the community as a separate entity to create its own letter and set up a petition process by the various methods that you brought up, tabling, electronic outreach, and public communication, so that there can be an additional letter presented to the County Board of Supervisors at their meeting on the 16th, in addition to the city's official letter as a whole. And I would be happy to work with you and with any other individuals who are interested in drafting such a letter or taking part in those processes, because I'm not sure how much the city can attach public sort of input and support to their letter, whereas having a separate community-based letter of public support in addition to the city's letter may be more effective in terms of demonstrating the extent of community support and backing for the proposed allocations. Thank you.
Mayor, there are no more public comments.
Thank you. And given that this is a workshop format this morning, there will be, again, plenty of opportunity to comment related to the ARPA funds. So again, a little bit ago, and we'll post as necessary the numbers and the for the Zoom meeting and the phone numbers so that people may join. So I'm closing now the public comment period under citizens to be heard, and going on to the workshop item for this morning, which is a continuation of a workshop we had in October 9th, related to the American Rescue Plan Act funds, and the preliminary staff recommendations for allocating ARPA funds is what we will hear this morning. And then following that will be an opportunity for engaging with the public. So Ms. Guillory, do you have something for us?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Martinez-Rubin. Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem Salemi, members of the council, city staff, and members of the community. Thank you for joining us this morning to continue discussions around this very important topic of the American Rescue Plan Act funding and how to best leverage and spend those funds in the best interest of the Pinole community. I do have a presentation that I'm going to pull up. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, it's visible. Thank you.
Thank you. So as the mayor mentioned, this is a format, so a little different from the regular city council meetings. And the goal of the workshops is to have more public engagement on this topic of the ARPA funding, and to make sure that all stakeholders are at the table to discuss how we can best meet the needs of the community in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I also have here, joining me today is our representatives from HDL, Barry Foster and Sandra Meyer. They've been instrumental in guiding us through this process. They've helped to review our revenue loss calculation, and I'll talk a little bit about that more later. They are also staying apprised of any new legislation and any new developments around the ARPA Act, and advising us on those as they come up. They'll also be assisting with putting together a funding plan once the final decisions are made. So for this agenda, I'll just give a brief overview of the American Rescue Plan Act. I will also highlight some of the results from the business recovery and community surveys. I will provide an overview, or Barry Foster, will provide an overview of the Shop Local gift card program, as there has been much interest around that. And then we'll open it up for public comment. And this is meant to be an open dialogue, and we encourage the members of the community to express their comments and to also pose any questions that they may have for city staff and or the city council. And then we will turn it over to the city council to provide their input and your priorities. And then we'll discuss the next steps. So just a reminder that the American Rescue Plan Act is a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus package. And of this package, $350 billion was allotted to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Of that allotment, Pinole was determined to receive $4.6 million. We have received 1/2 of our allocation in the amount of $2.3 million that was received in July, and we expect to receive the remaining $2.3 million next year in July. So as per the U.S. Department of the Treasury guidelines, organizations receive 1/2 of their allocations and then the remainder 1 year later. Some of the general allowable uses of the ARPA includes addressing negative economic impacts, and this could be in the form of financial assistance to businesses, individuals, households. It also addresses any public health support. So, for example, we have staff members who are required to be tested for COVID weekly, so the city could use a portion of the funds to go toward that. It also includes premium pay, and that is mostly for essential workers in the fields of healthcare, childcare, so on and so forth. Infrastructure improvements in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and then revenue replacement to backfill any revenue loss for general services provided by the city. The ineligible uses includes we're not allowed to deposit into a pension fund such as PERS, and we're not allowed to use the funds to offset any tax measures where the revenue proceeds may not have materialized. Agencies are not allowed to backfill with ARPA funds. So in this community engagement efforts that the city put together and that the city council directed staff to do, we had a number of outreach efforts that we engaged in, and that included mailing flyers out to all households and commercial addresses in Pinole. We also posted our flyer on the website and then also on the city's Facebook. It was included in the administrative report. In addition to that, the Bayfront Chamber of Commerce helped us to promote these workshops. And in addition to that, for community input, we put together 2 surveys with the help of HDL. So the first survey was the Business Recovery Survey, and that was open for about 1 month. We received 21 responses from that, and here are some of the highlights from that survey. The top business types reported, according to the respondents, were beauty and personal services, retail, finance, insurance and real estate, fitness center and gyms, restaurants and bars, and then other category. And there were a number of businesses that fell into that category. Most of the respondents reported being self-employed or having 1 to 4 employees. And 90% reported being negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which we expected that number would be pretty high. Most reported receiving some type of assistance up to $5,000 or in the range of $20,000 to $50,000. Some of the top challenges reported included reestablishing the customer base, cash flow disruptions due to reduced customer demand, marketing of businesses, and paying rent and utilities. 33% reported wanting assistance with establishing their businesses online, so trying to reestablish their customer base and remarket their businesses. They did report that they would like services to assist with that. 80% reported that they have not benefited from any protections under the Contra Costa County commercial rent moratorium. The top types of negative impacts included the loss of revenue, and of course that's expected with reduced customer demand. And then a temporary closure of businesses was another negative impact. 70% reported receiving some form of government assistance related to COVID, and those are listed below, including the Paycheck Protection Program, the California Small Business Assistance Program, Employment Development Department Program, and the Pinole Small Business Assistance Program, which was launched earlier this calendar year. So after reporting on the impacts of COVID, there were a number of questions to help businesses look at how to recover from those. And so some of the top types of assistance desired that came in at the top were improvements to the downtown and commercial areas to try to help boost the local economic environment, assist with applying for grants and loans for other programs that are offered at the state, county, and federal levels, rent assistance programs, and then the Shop Local Grant Program, which has become pretty popular amongst a number of jurisdictions, and there seems to be interest in the Pinole community as well for this type of program. And Barry will provide more information on how that program will work a little bit later in the workshop. So after we launched the business survey, we launched the community survey, and this was targeted to all members of the Pinole community. We received 31 responses. This was launched through the Balancing Act simulation tool. So it was set up in a way to prioritize the main categories of allowable uses of the ARPA funding. And these were the results. The users were allowed to assign dollar amounts to each of these categories. And so most assigned the highest dollar amounts to the backfill of revenue, of lost revenue, for school and education support, for infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, facilities, and parks, which is a little different from the investments in water, sewer, and broadband. They reported wanted fire and emergency services, police services, and environmental improvements, mainly around climate action related initiatives. The second category was the investments in water, sewer, and broadband, with water and sewer projects coming in a little above the broadband projects. Number 3 was financial assistance to businesses and households, with small business coming out at the top as the higher priority. And then lastly, support for public health response. And as I mentioned, one of the areas where the city could use that funding is to fund the required weekly testing for some of the Pinole staff. So after looking at everything in totality and evaluating the community input from the October 9th workshop, looking at the city council input and also the survey results of the business recovery survey, as well as the community survey, staff came up with the following recommendations. So we did not assign any dollar amounts, as there's still time to do that. But we did use the feedback from those meetings and a number of other operational things to be considered is how we came up with the recommendations. So the backfill of revenue loss is one that staff is recommending. And the $2 million that you see here in the parentheses, that is the calculation or the estimated revenue loss that we calculated for the city of Pinole, using the public loss calculator. So it's a standardized tool that was rolled out to all agencies to estimate their revenue loss. Now, it's not based on actual revenue loss because that's a little bit difficult to calculate, but it does look at counterfactual information from the prior 3 years and looks at trends and says, well, if COVID didn't happen, then this is probably where you would have been. But since COVID happened and you did not end up in that on that same trend, this is how the loss is calculated. So this was something that was just more standardized to help agencies estimate what that loss was. Staff is also recommending to fund financial assistance to businesses. This is a very high priority. And to fund assistance to households. There were a number of items that came out around this during the first workshop, including providing air purifiers and providing support for rent payments, mortgage payments, utilities, and other short-term needs. And then, as I mentioned before, to fund the public health support for the weekly testing requirements. Staff is not recommending to invest in the sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure at this time for a number of reasons. Number one, these are longer term projects. And just to be clear, as far as the spending, we do have to have the funds obligated by December 31st, 2024, but they don't have to be fully expended until December 31st, 2026. So we wanted to keep that in mind and look at funding more of those short-term needs in the interim. And then using some of the planning processes that are underway to inform spending on the infrastructure programs. So for example, the economic development strategy is underway. There are a number of master plans that are underway. And then there's some potential to work on some regional partnerships with other agencies. So we suggest pushing this out a little bit in terms of the final decisions and deferring those decisions for a later time. It should also be noted that we've been checking in regularly with some of our neighboring jurisdictions, and Pinole is actually a little bit ahead of the game as far as where some other jurisdictions are. They're taking it a little bit slower, just given that there are some larger projects to be considered, such as in the infrastructure category. And then there is some changing legislation that folks are waiting for those final decisions to be made before they finalize their funding plan. And then lastly, as I mentioned, just defer some of those decisions as we continue to have conversations and then have our plans completed that will be used to inform your decision making on the remaining funds outside of anything that you deem necessary to be funded now. And so the next steps after this workshop, after we hear everyone's input and receive any direction that the City Council may have, City staff will take action to advance those initiatives identified by the Council as directed. And that concludes my presentation, and we can open up the floor for any questions, comments, and go into the public comment section of the workshop.
Thank you, Ms. Guillory. Let's do that. So Ms. Stone, let us know what public comments there are on cue.
Okay.
Now, if I may, please, pardon me. So there's an extra note on our agenda for this workshop, and I'm going to just read verbatim what is there in case people didn't get a chance to see. Public comment and questions are going to be facilitated in this open workshop format. Following the presentation we just heard from Director Guillory, comments and questions will be taken one at a time in the order in which hands are raised in Zoom. Members of the public may raise their hands more than once for follow-up comments and or questions. And there you have it. That's a little different from what we've done before during regular City Council meetings. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We have Travis.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Super. I was just going to comment, I'm a household, a homeowner here in the city of Pinole. And before we started, it seems like we've made a lot of recommendations already based on the submission of 21 businesses and 31 residents. And we've said that we've made an effort to go out into the community and to seek recommendations, but I would submit that that few of a sample size out of a town of over 20,000 people is woefully inadequate to make these sort of decisions. What's been done to increase the number of that sample size? I just happened to see this meeting on a Nextdoor app that somebody was promoting because they wanted a firehouse in their community to reopen. And so I'd submit that most of the people that have responded to this are people who are looking to respond versus those who have found a need to respond. Has a mailer been sent out? Have public emails been collected to submit forms so that we can have a survey that is wide enough to make spending of $4.6 million in a town of 20,000 people satisfactory to satisfy the needs of the public? That seems like a super small sample size, and I mean, I run a business, and I wouldn't put any weight into that and running my small business, much less an entire city. So I would submit that we would need, before we need to make any recommendations, that we would need to spend some of that money to seek out the recommendations of the entire community. That's all I have to say.
Mayor, did you want to take the next comment, or?
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to our consultants, because this facilitation and this workshop format, yeah, the council suggested that we conduct this, but the facilitation piece is something that I was looking forward. I will not be doing, but let me know, HDL reps, how you are going to proceed with this. Otherwise, I will do, put on my facilitator hat, but I wasn't expecting to do so.
That's correct, Mayor. So
Okay.
we'll be facilitating that. And I would like to respond. So to respond, we agree the survey sample is small for both the business and community surveys. As I mentioned, we did send out mailers to every residential and commercial address in Pinole, and that was done before the October 9th workshop. And at that time, the business survey was open. It was open for 1 month as of today. And then for the community survey, that's been open for 2 weeks. We sent out a second mailer after the October 9th workshop to all addresses again. We also promoted the mailer on the city's website, as well as Facebook. The administrative report and the Bayfront Chamber of Commerce also helped us with that. We also had several community members come in and pick up flyers and hand them out at special events. And some also knocked on their neighbors' doors, as far as I understand, to encourage them to participate in not only the workshops, but also in responding to the surveys. So we have tried a number of engagement efforts to get as many responses as we could. And the community survey is actually still open. We wanted to leave that open a little beyond this meeting to give folks a chance to respond if they'd like.
Thank you. So, Ms. Guillory, and you can let us know this, because I have some comments in response to that question as well, but I'd like to leave the council member portion for later. Yes. And have us all hear what the public would like to say about this. So let's continue with public comments, please.
Sure.
Thank you. We have David or Irma report.
Good morning, folks. This is David Overbrook Jr. I'd like to do the first speaker's comments, but that's going to take more than 3 minutes to express my opinions. I'll probably put them in writing as usual, since I pulled the 3-minute rule. Second of all, I'd like to quickly remind the people that other people have been working on this nationwide, a problem of allocation of ARPA funds. My prior meetings with you and conversations, I've indicated the National League of Cities has been involved with this since the legislation was enacted in January, and they have quite a few excellent documents. I listed one the last time. Because of the 3-minute rule, I didn't have time to tell you that ARPA has been doing other things that we don't have the economic facilities to do for our portion of the 4.6 million. On the 7th, which was a little before our seminar, on the 9th, ARPA had their own seminar on this. It's called How to Implement ARPA Grant Management for Small Cities and Towns. Quite informative. I think you folks can probably take a look at that. if you want to see what's happening nationwide as opposed to locally. In addition to that, the NLC has also put out a publication called New Guidance on ARPA Funds for Broadband Projects, if that were to be a consideration. More salient to what I'm interested in talking about and having the City Council look at is the actual legislation, and NLC and other agencies, including some state agencies, have weighed in heavily on those issues as far as what we should be using these funds for, and the prioritizing of those funds, because we seem to be all over the board, because 4.6 million really doesn't go very far. I can spend it on one of the entitlements listed. We seem to be interested in using the flexibility of general fund usage of these funds, which I don't disagree with, but there is a prioritization of those funds that the city should take seriously and not waste them on generic items that have little priority and effect upon alleviating city woes from the pandemic that we're in. I would remind you that Congressman David Scott of Georgia stated something in one of his speeches today, that we are in a pandemic and we need to do something directly about that, and I'm paraphrasing his whole speech. So therefore, I think the council should, when they look at allocation of these funds, look at the real needs with realization that we can't satisfy everybody's needs, but we do need to set a priority list, not based on partisanship, but on practicality of what's going to serve the city the best. And I know you're doing that. I've seen great improvement from the advertising on the first postcard to the second. I also see some of the questions that I had wanted to be answered from my prior comments to the city, which are on the record, by the way. You've got all those, and you should have read them by now to see where some of my interests are going. Again, I'm running out of time. I will give you a letter filling in more stuff I'm talking about, but I think my wife wants to speak as a second person because of the computer problems. Can you hear her?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We have to trade seats. Thank you very much. I read your agenda and the recommendations and what we'll be discussing today. However, I want to highlight a few things, maybe discuss them for later with you guys. Like the first caller, the response was low. Results were really outrageous of 21 responses. I won't go there, belabor the situation that's going on. However, I do have a problem with some of these things. Page 4, something about grants and loans and some of the top priorities. As we all know, we're hiring 3 or 4 different people specialized to help us around the city. Some of these things can be required in their back experience and qualifications. Maybe we've been told about a grant writer, bring some of these monies back. There's a lot of grant funding out there, federal, state, and local, that we could receive for public safety or whatever. Bring someone and bring people who can help the city move forward, and make sure that they're qualified. We've been down this path before. We hire people who don't know diddly squat what they're doing, and then we're lost in the shuffle. And then hiring consultant after consultant is really troubling for me. I can go down your transaction listings and look at all the consultants, excuse me, but not the one that we hired today. I feel it's very much needed. However, the only thing that I want to say too about something about this evaluation that we're supposed to receive from the consultant is mid-2022. Don't you think that's a little too late? We're working on it now, and then 2022, so some of these things should be made a decision on. However, I don't mind not spending the money. As you know, everything's going up, PG&E, gas, everything's going up, food, and the city's going to be in dire straits after the new year, trying to recover some of these funds, emergency funds. I disagree in putting them in the general fund. We don't have a history of spending our money wisely. So in my opinion, do not do that for the purpose of controlling this money to the proper places that they should. Emergency funds. Again, Station 74 will be needing money in the next year or so, as we discussed this past week. Make sure that we do the right thing for the citizens. This is taxpayers' money. This is not somebody's checkbook, somebody's private account. And let's make sure that what we do is for emergencies and not anybody's little paycheck or checkbook. Again, Mayor and Council, I look forward to discussing some of these issues and make sure, like the first caller said, you know, bring more people in, whichever way we have to do. Thank you.
Christy Lamb Julian.
Good morning, everyone. So my concern with this is just to piggyback what all the other folks have commented on. 21 businesses, 31 community members is just sad. I'm not sure who is in charge of community engagement or what have you, but just personally, I feel sending out a flyer and just kind of putting it out there on the internet is a cop-out. I would like more from the folks in charge to reach out and really engage the community. It's a lot of money and the town has a lot of needs. And people can go back and forth on what should be prioritized and what shouldn't. I do feel there's a lot of consultants being hired, which is great to a degree, but just what are the people that we have in office doing to reach out and just get on the base level with the everyday resident here to just engage and say, take the temperature of the room. And then, so just with the backfill process, will we have more meetings on that to get more input from the community members on each line of just, for me, it's schools. It is just unacceptable. A lot of the conditions of the schools in town, what it looks like right now. It is just, I implore you to come out and visit the schools to see what the kids have come back to see what the teachers and the support staff have come back to after a very, very hard year. And that would be it. Thanks.
Rafael Menace.
So I have a few questions at this point. I'm sure I'll have more later, but that's a benefit of the workshop format, allowing for multiple rounds of questions and comments as ideas arise. My first question is with regards to the public health suggestion. The city stated that several staff members need to be tested weekly for COVID as part of their work. And I brought up a question that I have. Do we know what percentage of city staff, both within the various departments and as a whole, have been vaccinated against COVID-19? And is that information something that can be shared with the public? It seems like that would be a worthwhile point to know, because if people need to be tested just because of occupational risk, that's one thing. But if people need to be tested because they've chosen not to be vaccinated and are relying on some exemption or another and being tested because of that, I would have more difficulty with supporting city funding for basically mitigating the consequences of people's choices against accepted medical science. Secondly, with regards to the size of response, I agree with the other commenters that it would be desirable to have a broader community response with regards to the various surveys. I note, though, that even pre-pandemic, around 20 to 30 respondents actually attending workshops like this and actually responding to city surveys has been broadly typical in my experience with regards to the level of public engagement that the city can get with outreach. Having a higher level of engagement would probably require the city to engage in higher intensity outreach, like literally setting up a door knocking program somehow, having city staff or city volunteers going around knocking on doors in the city and manually getting people to log into the app and respond while they were there. And that would take substantially more effort, cost, and risk for a city to implement, especially during COVID. I know that the community transmission rate of COVID is lower and that a significantly larger portion of our community is vaccinated than was earlier, though that number has, of course, gone down now that the eligible vaccinated population includes 5 to 11-year-olds. Sorry. But it is challenging, and I think it's worth recognizing that it's challenging, especially during the pandemic, to gain a broader outreach sample size. I'll admit that we can do better, but at the same time, it's non-trivial to get a fully representative sample survey. And I guess I'll leave my comments out there for now. Thank you.
Rain.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, and city officials of Pinole for providing us this opportunity again. This is Ruchit Rain on behalf of Orange Theory Fitness in Pinole. I'm hoping this meeting brings some positive hopes and the much needed help for Pinole small businesses, such as us who faced extreme financial hardships due to COVID forced shutdowns. Which, based on the staff recommendation slide we just saw, it feels that the help is coming, hopefully soon. I would like to reiterate some good possible solutions we recommended in the first meeting for your consideration as details of the initiatives are planned. 1, provide grants to businesses to reduce their debt or help with the back rent. 2, provide low interest long-term loans with a portion of it forgivable if qualified. This will also help churn the funds that city has received to reinvest in different initiatives that are in question right now. Request county to help reduce property taxes for the affected commercial properties. Like I said in my previous meeting, our property tax is 25% of our total rent right now. We look forward to receiving more updates and details on how small businesses can receive this help soon. When times were good, we have given back to the community as much as we could by sponsoring local, school sports teams, be community sponsor for Chamber of Commerce, through other initiatives like Toy Drive. Christmas is coming. We're still going to do it irrespective of how hard times we are in. Now we need help, and we hope as a community we all can fight this together and help each other out. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Terry Scott. Terry Scott, are you able to unmute yourself?
Oh, I thought I did. I didn't push the button. Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Stott. I'm from Bear Claw Bakery in Pinole here. My husband and I and family have run a business here for about 40 years. All my children were educated here in Pinole. My grandchildren are being educated. I understand what the one caller had spoken about as far as the schools and their upheaval getting back into the flow of things. But I think a lot of that needs to be directed to school district meetings, the school board meetings. They receive a lot of funds also, and they need to learn how to appropriate them correctly. And I think they have a hard time sometimes with that. And that's being from a parent who's educated 4 children through the system, and myself included. For a small business, we've been pretty blessed, and we have a lot of experience, so we pivoted a lot. It's been hard, but we've come through. There are a lot of state and federal programs for us as small businesses also. So if you have a business, I would want to think that you would like to tap into that. And I also want to say, I don't know what else the city could do as far as reaching out. I mean, it's on social media. It has had mail out flyers. People were at farmers markets and
other public events. I don't know what else. Sometimes people just, unless it affects them directly, they seem not to want to be involved. And that's just humans in general. I've noticed that in, being involved in schools and other public events, and in my business. And it's just our nature. It is sad to think, at least we could have gotten 20%, but I don't think that all lies on the shoulders of the people trying to get the message across. As citizens, we need to reach out and see where that, what's going on, be connected to the Facebook page in the city and engage with people. I don't know, I just wanted to say that, and I hope everybody does well. I think next year is going to be very tough. I know it's going to probably be tougher for us than the last 2 years have been. Costs are going out of the roof, and they're going to continue to do so. So I hope we make it all through, and everybody stays safe, healthy, and happy. Okay, thank you.
Rafael Menace.
So after thinking some more, I also had some further thoughts I'd like to share with regards to the allocation of funding. I think it was brought up earlier with regards to the financial assistance to businesses that it should be done with, and I may be misrecalling this commenter's comment in particular, but with regard to offsetting lost revenue. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the correct metric to use, because that's going to vary a lot based on business size. Larger businesses are naturally going to have more lost revenue because they're going to have been more impacted by closures earlier on in COVID and loss of customer support. I think that with regards to business assistance, it might be better to do it based on need, so far as it's possible for the city and the various businesses to assess that, like how much resources the particular business has available for its support, what reserves they have available to rely on, what costs they incurred as a proportion of pre-pandemic costs relative to their overall revenue, so on and so forth, rather than just do a simple analysis of this is X amount of revenue that we lost, and therefore we'd like to be reimbursed by the city for Y, because that would, I think, disproportionately benefit larger businesses to the cost of smaller businesses and the city as a whole. Because, as has been noted, I'm sure any assistance that's granted to businesses or to individuals or to any given category in the responses is assistance that by its nature can't be granted to the other categories. And I also think that while we're not obligated to spend the funds before, frankly, 2026, I think it would be worthwhile to spend at least some portion of the funds within this fiscal year to show an immediate impact to the community that, yes, we've received these funds and we're spending funds to benefit the community directly, both through the city and through financial assistance programs to individual households and to small businesses, rather than having it all go out into the future. There's a benefit to having a planned out longer term process, but there's also a benefit to immediate aid to offset immediate impacts of the pandemic. Thank you.
At this time, there are no more public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. So we've heard a lot of, well, I want to qualify that. We've heard some public comments. And it seems to me that we keep hearing from the same public commenters. And I'm going to guess that that's likely the case with the responses that we've gotten. So it is troubling and it's disappointing, to say the least, the kind of response that we've gotten. I don't believe it's all a consequence of a lack of outreach. So we do have to think about other approaches. At this time, I'm going to turn to council for their questions and comments, and then I will also have more as we move along. And so, based on the comments that we heard, I've made notes. I think other council members might have made notes as well. Staff have made notes, and I just want to ask if there is an opportunity to clarify or rectify any statements. If we know, if we have a basis to do so, that I would ask staff to do so. I've made some note on some. As an example, is interest about assisting schools, and that leads me to believe that there are some members of the public who would consider that the council has a large role to play in communicating with the school district about what the school district can do to assist the schools and education programs, etc. And that there are different roles and responsibilities to be had by the different bodies. And so a different way of saying it is that the situation of the schools and the educational programs in Pinole largely rests on is a responsibility of the school district and not the council. So that's an example of that. It doesn't mean that we cannot work together with the school district, but there are different funding availabilities, and yes, how the funds are used with regard to schools is largely a consequence of how over time the different school boards have determined those funds are going to be used, not our city council. Okay, so let's turn to council members, please, for your...
Mayor, before we turn to council, there are a few virtual hands that have just popped up. Did you want to take those first?
Okay, let's do that, please.
Okay, thank you. David Almeida. David, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council, City staff, my name is David Almeida, and I am in the process of trying to continue and start a business at the former Blue Sky Sports building on San Pablo Avenue. The owner of the building and the former business of Blue Sky was my cousin, Greg Fair, who actually located there in 1989 after having had a store down the street in the what is now like the Embers Shopping Center for a number of years. But for a long time was certainly a pillar in the business community in Pinole and the greater Pinole area, to include certainly Hercules, Rodeo, Crockett, Richmond, El Sobrani, you name it. I have recovered over, well, tens of thousands of patterns. I know because I've got them all because of all the teams that he helped over the years, sports programs and whatnot. But again, due to big pressure from big box stores, I won't name them, you all know who they are, and online presence, to be relevant in the community, he needed to have a large inventory. So people say, well, don't worry about it. If you don't have it, I'll just go ahead and order it online. Anyway, flash forward to today. I had started a business some years ago, had been in Sonoma County, had to relocate there because of continual shutdowns and travel restrictions and whatnot. But again, I must implore you to look at immediate help, as was brought up in the last meeting by council people Salimi and Tave, and has been brought up with various speakers over these last two meetings. Really, you're not providing, in my case, it's not an assistance for a business that is no longer here. It's not assistance for a business that is not yet here, but it's a bridge from the past to the future via assistance in the present. I think that to plan things and say, well, we're going to give assistance, between 2022 and 2026 is too late for a lot of our smaller businesses. The gentleman, Richard Ring, that spoke about Orange Theory, his needs are much greater than mine, but I just wanted to say that, again, with a 250-foot frontage and a lot of floor space, my business is vintage collectibles. And the style of the building, I intend to continue with Art Moderne, which is something different from downtown, but certainly in keeping with its 1948 establishment there as a building. But, again, I've already spoken with Pinole Historical Society people. I want to reserve a space for that, which would, again, be complementary to my business and maybe solve a problem for the city at the same time. But restoration and offering for sale, these various things, I think would be unique in a community, especially on the size and scale that I have in mind, that I have already in stock. But again, I got to get from where I am to where I need to be. I think loans is the way to accomplish that. Grants would be terrific, but a loan would be a reinvestment that would come back to the community to be reused in a future time, whether it goes to general fund or to specific purposes. I know my time is up, but I appreciate you listening to me this morning, and when a process is identified to apply for such funds, I would certainly be willing to do so. We'll write you a letter, a pre-proposal, if you will, in the interim. Thank you.
Okay, we have a computer up. It's 102030. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hi. This is Peter Murray. Good morning, Council. Thank you for putting on this community meeting. Kind of important when you have an amount of money to spend and you try to determine, the equitable expenditure of the funds. One of the things that I'm sure that you're well aware of is that these are one-time monies, and so they should be spent with that in consideration and not indebting yourself going into the future. One of the things that you were talking about was the card that was the mailer that was put out, and then the response, and that's never really worked. Card gets sent out, it's small, people put them aside and think, okay, I'm gonna do something with that, and then gets put out with the rest of the newspapers or things of that nature. So you don't really get an accurate, I think, a view of people's intent. Zoom meetings are great, but I think that the council should start really considering getting the meetings up and going again, so that you can have people engaged and they're with facing the council and you giving their input into the city's business and the way they want to see the city proceed. One of the things that I've noticed is that we have a lot of deterioration in the infrastructure of the city. And I'm assuming it's due to COVID and not being able to stay on top of everything. And that's, in all the years that I've participated, it's been an issue that you really have to keep in the forefront of your daily activities in the city. And there's going to be quite a bit of an expense to get the city. And that needs to be addressed in some fashion with these funds, I believe. And that saves the general fund from being overly taxed to get these city amenities back to workable condition for the community. One of the things that I've noticed is that our streets, particularly the not the signage, but the striping and that has deteriorated in areas where I think we're going to start seeing issues of accidents, particularly at night when you can't identify which lane you're to be in. And that's just it. You got the parks and everything that really needs to have some thoughts put to how are you going to bring them back up to the standard that the community expects. But I just want to reiterate that I think that getting face-to-face meetings back in operation again is something that's very important. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, Christy Lamb Julian.
Hey there. So my concern is just kind of trying to read the Zoom room right now. The comments of just, well, it's up to the school district and they need to go figure it out and what have you is pretty much the consensus of people from my demographic of just the city council, the older members of this town just don't care. They don't have the kids in the system anymore. They were there and what have you. and it's just they don't care. In regards to the effort to reach out to the community really for anything, I just would encourage who does the communication to think outside the box and try to actually reach the town. Again, with postcards, just like the previous caller said, it's a small piece of paper that comes out in the mail. And how often do people go on social media and just zone out and you're just scrolling through? It's just ineffective. It's not necessarily an issue of having to dedicate an actual person and funds to it. Just use what we have to get a little bit more creative and get out there to the community, because the consensus at schools for pickup and drop-offs is that nobody cares. It's up to the school districts, and it is disappointing to hear that here in this meeting, that we should take it up to there. But if the city isn't really wholeheartedly supporting the schools and the infrastructure and parks and that sort of thing for the kids, then who's really going to go up to bat and get us all together to make it better for everyone, for parks and schools and all that jazz, is my concern. And I would be more than happy to reach out to whoever with my ideas of just sort of grassroots communication efforts that have worked for other people that we could utilize to get through to the townspeople and address this sort of thing. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Next we have IANCIRA. This person is actually using an older version of Zoom, so I'm not able to allow them to speak. So we will move on to Terry Scott. Terry, are you there?
Okay, yeah, I'm there. Okay. I think I was misunderstood from the last speaker's comments. Anybody who knows me knows I value children over anything. I was just saying that the energy needs to be directed towards the body, the government body that has the funds that allocates out. I support schools. In fact, during the pandemic, we ran fundraisers for numerous schools. I'm in support of schools, but I also know where the funds come from and how much power and control, each entity has in a particular item. If, anybody wants to reach out and help with the school district, I'd be more than happy to do so. As a city, it would be nice if the council could speak on our collective behalf to maybe leverage certain things. I know the principal at Pinole Valley and many of the officials would like to have more support, but I think all you can do really within the city scope is political leverage. But I just didn't want it to think, I'm an older member of the community, but I am very connected to young people and children, and I do have a vested interest because I have grandchildren. Anyway, I just felt I need to say that because I felt that I was misunderstood. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I may just make a quick announcement for individuals with outdated Zoom, that they can use the call-in option. And I'm not sure if that slide could be shown briefly for that telephone number.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Can we have that slide up, please? There, we're all getting there. Thank you. So members of the public, what Ms. Stone just mentioned was if you cannot access the Zoom webinar through your computer, you may use a phone number. Call in 1-669-900-6833. 1-669-900-6833, and that will get you connected. You'll have to press then *9 to alert staff that you'd like to comment. And then when Ms. Stone acknowledges your number appearing on our screens, then you will press *6 to unmute once you're called on. Thank you, Ms. Stone.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from R. Rain.
Hello, everyone, for giving me this opportunity again. I've been listening to all of the comments that came in and wanted to add a couple of thoughts that came in my mind. One, I agree, I believe it was David who said, grants are good, but loans with something that will help too. These are one-time funds. Small business community, as many of you would agree that, we try our best to reach out to the community. We provide that silent backbone to a lot of initiatives like sponsoring school teams, doing toy drive and other initiatives by city. These are one-time funds, and having those low-interest loans would help us multiply these funds to reinvest in a lot of different categories. I'm not opposed to it. Let me be clear. I'm not asking for free money. I'm asking for help right now where banks would not help us, and due to the forced shutdown, because banks are commercial and they would only look for your revenue right now based on, what amounts they can give. But as a city, you can help us, fund our immediate concerns right now, empower us to be stronger again like we were before pandemic, and then, try to give back to the community. I would not be even opposed to, proposing an idea of, if we give you X amount of funds, a percentage of it, when you make money, comes back to certain initiative a city wants, like infrastructure, like anything else. I wouldn't mind donating a $2,000, $2,500 check, back to the community, if the community, came through to help me in this bad time and survive this pandemic and the losses that we are facing right now. So something to consider, please, that, it's a one-time fund, but we can, with the help of small business and the community, we can actually use it in a way that we can multiply it and give back to the city as the time goes on. Hopefully that makes sense, but, I want to see how we can multiply these funds and help as many people, because all of us have good ideas, all of us have different needs, but like somebody said, if you're not hit by it, you won't get a response. And we are here, desperately trying to get help because we're almost on the grounds, Thank you so much once again, for hearing me out. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lance Smith.
Good morning, City Council. My name is Lance Smith. I'm a resident here in Pinole. Actually been in Pinole for 20 plus years, and I live on Buena Vista Drive, just above Old Town. And I'm happy to say that I'm a proud Pinolean, and really grateful for the City Council for this opportunity to speak out on this important topic, and really want to thank the City Council for taking public comment on this important issue. I would just remind us that while the amount of money provided by ARPA sounds like a lot, it actually, in the global scheme of what we as a city have to tackle, is a limited amount. And I think we need to focus these resources on our most needed items, which in my opinion is our infrastructure. And I know others have spoken to this issue, and I thank you for listening to me and to the others. I think our roads, definitely our fire protection. I think we dodged a bullet this year with the early rains, but that's not going to be, our future with climate change and others. And I think anything that we can do to use this money to improve our infrastructure, the police, the fire, the roads, will bring new businesses, will bring an improvement of the city, which will help improve property values, which will increase property taxes. And that is the biggest bang for our buck. And if we have a good foundation, it means that we have a good future. And so I would just encourage you to use the money for our infrastructure and for those things that will build that foundation that will lead to a better Pinole. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Have a nice day.
David Almeida.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Again, Madam Mayor, Council, staff, and listeners, I just wanted to respond to, and thanks for the opportunity to speak again, just want to respond to the last speaker, and I wholeheartedly support infrastructure. Speaking as a former police officer and business owner, I can tell you nothing's more important than having those critical city services, fire, police, public works, whatnot. But we need to fund that. And this 4.6 million, as several speakers have pointed out, is not a lot of money. And I thank Mr. Ring for echoing my thoughts on investing in the businesses that will provide the steady revenue streams in the future that will provide for such infrastructure. So while I support the last speaker's concern about those critical services and the roads and whatnot, that money also has to come from somewhere, and not just from a one-time drop in the bucket, which again, it was referred to in the last meeting about how many millions of dollars that the streets needed to come up to an 85% rating. Whereas help to small businesses right now in real time, would again provide for that future necessary to not only provide goods and services to the Pinole community, but also that critical tax revenue and income stream that will perpetuate those services far into the future. I'll draw the line there. Thank you.
Mayor, I'm just doing one last check. There are no more public comments.
Hey, thank you. And there may be more later, but let's turn and give time to council for their comments, reactions based on what we've heard. Probably go back to public comment, and then we do need to allow some time to provide some direction to staff. So perhaps we can do that in the last half hour. So council members.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, Lisa and Sarah, who's been trying to make public comment, she just logged on again. She may have a better system that might allow her to speak.
Ms. Stone, can you see that?
Yeah, her virtual hand just popped up. Let me try to unmute her.
Hello?
Are you? Yes, we can hear you.
Please forgive me. I have had a little bit of difficulty getting on, and I appreciate so much this opportunity to speak on behalf of our small business. And we love Pinole, and we love the fact that there are monies available. And we, like everybody, this moment is devastating for our whole infrastructure. So, oh my, how difficult to decide no amount of money is enough to kind of repair what has gone on. So I am going to say that I support the council and the hard work that they do to try to work through these kind of issues. And I trust our council members. They've had their hand on the pulse moving throughout this season. And we do not underestimate at all the wisdom that they have in seeing the things that we don't see. So I trust the council to see the things that we don't see. I'm just going to raise my hand. I mean, schools, our infrastructure, sidewalks, everything needs help. So I'm going to speak from what I know, which is the small business. And when I say small business, I'm talking about businesses with 50 or fewer employees. I think in dealing with all of our pandemic help, one thing that has been a global issue is that the term small business, a business to me that makes, that has upwards of 100 employees, in my book is not a small business. So we need to, first of all, reclassify what is small business. Secondly, I can say that loans, while loans are valuable for a business with 50% or less, typically loans are already in play. And so any grant money that can be available because of the pandemic, I think loans are such a beautiful opportunity that for an established business like ourselves, that are already have loans at play, any grant money available is so helpful. I will say from a small business, and I'm sure Terry can relate to this and our other small businesses in town, that this was not hurtful to our businesses. It decimated our businesses. So I would say that as much as you can support your Main Street businesses, specifically in that Old Town corridor, it would certainly be appreciated. And while loan monies are so valuable and helpful, and I do not want to minimize that, grant monies, I think, for this one-time shot are super to make an investment in the future of your businesses, specifically businesses 50 and under. I think those monies can be most valuable. And again, let me say thank you to the hours that you spend, Council, dealing with these kind of issues. I think probably there are not as many people here that need to be from our small business community because people are scrambling just to survive this season. So thank you very much.
We also have Travis.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you again for letting me speak, and I just wanted to again comment on some of the other comments that are here. Well, I think, you know, the city's investment in infrastructure and in schools is needed. My sense is this money was not intended to fund things that the city should already be funding through other mechanisms. In reaction to the previous comment about small business, while somebody might think 100 people is not a small business, others might not think 50 people or 25 is actually a small business. And so as we look to distribute this money in a fair and equitable way in the spirit of which it's intended, meaning a rescue plan, funding these sorts of things isn't likely, you're not going to find a fair and equitable way to say, well, this business gets this money and this business doesn't get this money. The city is also not a bank and probably shouldn't be in the business of making loans and grants to small businesses, because only those businesses with the aptitude and the need are going to be funded. And so if there are businesses which otherwise would have failed without the pandemic, I don't believe our city should be funding those businesses either. And the market can decide. So in my opinion, the city should seek a way to distribute that money to every citizen of Pinole. $4.6 million divided by 20,000 citizens is close to $250 a person. They distributed that money through debit cards, much like other big cities have done. The people themselves can figure out a way where they're going to spend their money. If there was a way to restrict those debit cards to local purchases, even better. But if you allow that injection of money to go straight to the citizens, they'll likely spend a good portion of it locally, grocery stores and gas stations and sports and fitness clubs. And in doing so, the citizens can decide where that money goes. And that will be the most equitable and fair way for the city to distribute the money. And there will be no discussion later on about who got what and who didn't, and who got left behind, and where you drew the line at a small business or what wasn't a small business. And certainly things like infrastructure in schools are needed, as I said. However, the city should already have strategies to be funding those sorts of initiatives, aside from being in a pandemic. Not everybody was hurt by this pandemic in that way. Certainly my taxes didn't go down. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. And I think the city should really look to distribute that money evenly to all its citizens. Thank you.
Mayor, there are no more public comments.
Okay, so let's hold public comment for a moment. We're just going to turn to council, see if there's anything different or reaction to comments that have been made. I also want to have staff comment again to rectify anything that and or to provide some information that might be helpful to have us all understand, council members and public all understand the basis for why we might make a decision. And then we'll have some time as well afterward to continue and then offer the direction that we may, at this point in this year, recognizing that there are some timelines that we also can consider. I don't want to say for final decisions, but at least for decisions for today. Thank you. So council members, I don't see virtual hands. I did see an earlier virtual hand from Councilmember Thompson. There it is. So please go ahead, Councilmember Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and get started on some of my reaction. I want to thank everybody who did attend, who has attended, and we have 25 attendees, which is really good, for this type of meeting. So I want to thank everybody for taking their time. We've had some really good input. My reaction as far as outreach, we sent 2 rounds of postcards to every citizen. We've had the notifications both at council meetings and on social media. I personally send out an email once a month, a newsletter to citizens, to over 4,800 people, and for the last 2 months I've had this on the agenda. So I think if there's lack of input, it's because it's perhaps that people are fine with how things are going, and the people who really have something to say are here and engaged. I also want to indicate that I have spoken to a lot of people directly, and I will share some of the direct input that I have received. Much of it is very similar to comments made by small businesses here, and some of it is a little bit different. But and then I also want to state regarding school districts, special districts like cities also got allocations. And our school board member, who is very engaged with her constituents, that's Jamila Smith Folds, please contact her regarding the expenditure of the funds that the district got. And if somebody wants to, contact me on the side, I will provide that contact information. As far as, the distribution for citizens, evenly across the board, my personal impact was not as, significant as others. So, I would really stay away from that equitable distribution of, all citizens. But the program for debit cards that was mentioned, and it's promoted by the Chamber of Commerce, that's something that would directly benefit local businesses. And on the survey, for those folks that did fill out the survey, they indicated that getting their customer base back is really important. And so that's something that would assist them. Another thing was marketing. There's ways that we as a city can help market businesses. And, we currently send out, I think twice a year, we send out a publication of programs that is sponsored by the city for recreation. We can add to that. It'd be a minuscule increase in the mailing cost, and then there would be a printing increase, and make something that, really promotes businesses in Pinole. There's, special events to draw people in to downtown, which is another form of marketing. Improvements in the infrastructure in the old town. I know that there were some commenters that said, we should be funding that anyway. Well, we have such a huge list of needs that maybe this is some way that we can, make some improvements sooner rather than later to our downtown. If it's restriping, signage for parking to help people find parking. We, as the council, without these funds, have agreed to have holiday lights up, and we've agreed to keep them up year-round. So that's something that we can expand, those types of things that, if we did a distribution across the population, we wouldn't be able to, really leverage those funds and do some of the bigger items. Let's see, where else did I have my notes? As far as I have spoken to some people in the restaurant and bar business that have indicated that, you know, they were closed for so long, but yet they still had to pay the health department fees during the time in which they were closed. Is that something that we might want to provide a grant to rebate those? Or, you know, business license fees, you know, could we rebate that for 1 or 2 years? And then I do have some concerns about loans versus grants, and that is what kind of collateral is the city able to, you know, how do we secure those public funds that go out on loans for somebody who doesn't actually own the property? So we have to think about, you know, protecting the public funds in which are going out there. I want to make sure that we're not subsidizing some, you know, if there's other loan programs out there that people have not taken advantage of, I don't want to go in and plug a hole that, you know, could be filled by another program. So that's kind of where I'm, you know, I'm leaning, and I do look forward to more discussion on this before we make a decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Mayor Pro Tem Salimi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have listened, and I came with a plan, and I would like to share my plan with you. Our goal is to distribute $4,605,010. This is what I suggest the City Council to do today. First of all, let me talk about our essential workers. Nobody has really mentioned anything about our essential workers since the pandemic started. We have had a few people who contracted COVID-19, and we're here helping our community. What I would like us to suggest to do is a small investment towards a community, towards our essential workers. And what I'm suggesting to do is to give those, the people who are essential workers in the fire department, police department, and public work, a bonus of $500. This is, we're probably talking about less than 100 employees, 75 people. $500 would represent less than $50,000 investment for people who invested their life in helping our society and the people in Pinole. So what I would like to do, first of all, is to thank them for their work and dedicate $50,000 to the essential workers in the city of Pinole, $500 each. That's one item. Item number two, I'd like to talk about small businesses, the people in Pinole, and the health support, public health support. In terms of businesses, what I'm thinking about doing is to distribute $3,000 up to 100 businesses that represent $300,000. So we will do small businesses $3,000 times 100, $300,000. And also for the people of Pinole, I'm thinking that will be a grant. For the people of Pinole, I'm thinking about $300 up to $300 up to 1,000 people. That's $300,000 as well in terms of grant. This is the fourth item will be the health support for public health for the cost of having to administer the costs for the COVID-19 and anything else associated to increased costs due to COVID-19. Would like to allocate $100,000. So between the small business support of $300,000, the help to the citizen of Pinole of $300,000 and health support of $100,000, we are talking about $700,000 here. That money of $700,000, I would like it to be dedicated for the year of 2022. And I also would like that money to be replicated in the year of 2023. So in 2022, we will basically provide $300,000 support to small businesses. $300,000 to citizen of Pinole, $100,000 towards the health support, and we will do the same thing, some $700,000 in 2023. So we are talking about $1.4 million here between 2022 and 2023, plus the $50,000 bonus allocation towards our essential workers. We are talking about $1,450,000. We have some money left here. The money left, I would like to dedicate $1 million to the infrastructure of the city of Pinole, $1 million. At this moment, we are left with $1 million, and the money that will be left, I would like to dedicate it to the revenue replacement for the city of Pinole. We are talking about $2,450,000. Will be, I believe the money. I do apologize. City loss revenue will be approximately $1,155,000, and that can be dedicated to the city loss, and also to the department head for any needs that they have. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tate?
Yeah, I want to first thank everybody. This is a great discussion. I think we've got a lot of stuff. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me. Is there great? The comments were spot on from what I've been hearing in the community. Just my initial reaction, because I did go there, was, well, what if we just dispersed all the money to everybody in Pinole, right? And all the households in Pinole. That is the most equitable way of doing things. But what I started to think was we really have to think about this as an investment, right? We need synergy out of this money. What we put in, we need to make sure lasts over time. I agree with the comments beforehand. Loaning is a difficult process. In the past, we've looked at trying to do a municipal bank or a bank for Pinole, and what those loans look like. We've done it in the past, and it wasn't successful as far as recovering money back, right? There was a lot of loans that needed to be forgiven during the redevelopment era. I think that at this time, we're really talking about 2.3 million. In my mind, I'd like to see the gift card program, which in my mind be tiered based on your business size and need. That criteria would need to be fleshed out, but what the gift card program does is it allows for us to give money to businesses for services at a discounted rate. It also allows for the potential for revenue to go from here to step that up for our businesses, and we're allowed to spread that over time. That's the theory of the gift card process, which allows a business to create that base, which I think if we could pull that slide up of what the small businesses need, was one of the things, marketing, getting our customer base back. We need that jolt, if you will, for our businesses. And what I want to do is make sure we don't spend too much money and allow for money to be there if this process doesn't get us the results we were looking for, that we could try a different avenue. So I want to make sure that as we're helping our businesses, we build in flexibility. What we've heard today was loans, a shot of money, to get us back to normal. Under normal circumstances, I would say, as a market, we need to make sure that we don't overhelp, right? That's not a wise use of taxpayer money. But we do need to make sure that we're incrementally helping, right? But these situations are not we're not in a normal situation. And we have to take that into account, that those grants, those shots of money need to be there for our businesses that need them. So I am trying to balance the over helping versus making sure that we have some system, and I think the gift card system might help there. When it comes to infrastructure, if you do not have a road to drive to your business, we as a city have not helped your business. If there is not parking for your customers and patrons to come to and park, we have not helped your business. And for years, we've had this issue. Pinole has taken steps. We've gotten the crack seal truck to make sure that we can help keep potholes and cracks and make sure that the roads aren't deteriorating further once we fix them. So we've been in this loop over years of using the same money to fix the same roads over and over again. This truck is helping us expand that amount of roads that we can actually help. So we have taken steps in this council to make sure that we're moving the ball upfield. I think this infusion of money would help increase that band of roads that we can take care of. So I really think that infrastructure is got to be part of this conversation along with the gift cards. As people said in the comments, we all know this is not a lot of money. This is not going to solve all of our problems, but we do need to make sure that we utilize this money as an investment. And I think the gift card infrastructure and then moving some of that money into our lost revenue will allow this council flexibility as we move through this process until the next infusion of money gets here. And we can track this very closely. I'd like to see some type of tracking mechanism as to how this money is being spent, that it's communicated back to the community. And as we have these discussions, I mean, we're a meet and greet and informed town. Letters in the mail, a lot of times go unmissed. Granted, the first one was not done well. I think the second one knocked it out of the park. So we are getting better at our communication, but there needs to be more done. There's no question that the door-to-door in this town gets the message across, gets people involved, and we're having this discussion. Today's discussion was great. I mean, we got a lot of information back and a lot of feedback to help process this. So I just want to thank everybody again. I mean, this is a great thing for our community. I think it's going to be great moving forward, but I think we should be cautious and make sure that we're deliberate as we do that. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councilmember Tate. So I'm going to offer some reaction to the comments made by the public, and then also let you know what my thoughts are about the use of the funds, at least for this first tranche, this first allocation, the 2.3. I'm not thinking yet about 4.6 yet, because I want to get back the results of the various assessments that are underway by the city. And those assessments have to do with taking a look at where we are with infrastructure to some degree. And also some of the services that were identified even in, was it 21, 31? The relatively very tiny number of responses received to date from the community. So thinking about the comments that were made, I think we can continue our conversations until the clock circles several times around, and hear various perspectives and different opinions as to how funds could be used. And that's a reflection of people's ideas about to what degree does a local government assist its residents and its businesses, and what does it mean to assist, and who gets the help. So I don't think we're going to come to an agreement necessarily about that. But largely speaking, looking at the intended use of these funds, there has to be a connection to the effect of COVID on whoever is assisted, whether that's a small business or whether it is a resident. And so we come back to this question, at least in my mind, the question that haunts us, I think, because we don't have an answer, and that is, where is the need? We hear some comments, we get written reaction to that. Any one of us as council members can speak to different individuals across town, whether it's door to door or otherwise, and we're going to get some inkling about that, and that's fine, that's okay, that's useful. I think we need to complement what we hear and the input that we receive, whichever means, whether it's surveys or letters to us or emails to us as council members, or individual conversations that we have with residents. Complement that with information that we can obtain that does reflect the composition of the city. so we can look at census data to inform where the residents are that would otherwise, even if we didn't hear them on our survey or we didn't hear them in public comment, that they may be in need of losing their homes because they can't make their back payments or due on rent, for example. We haven't touched on that, and fortunately, in a way, even with that very tiny number of folks that responded to the community survey, we see that that's the need for that isn't reflected in that input. That doesn't mean that people aren't out there. I think it's a reflection of us not being where those residents are, and that's comparable across cities. People in most need don't necessarily avail themselves of the opportunities to provide input because they are not accustomed to being asked about that, and they are busy enough trying to make their way on a daily basis in meeting the needs of their families. So historically, it has been a responsibility of government to respond to the most needs in a city. How we get to go about doing that, I think that in these days we have to go through some of the means that have been established because they've been proven to verify that the need is there, so that we continue to be the stewards expected of us and the stewards of public funds, and we just don't distribute I don't even want to say randomly, but we just don't distribute without a basis for that. There also, I think, we need to remember that we may not be hearing from everyone who would need it. And so we go back to those larger population-based ways of using public money. It's either going to be enhancing programs or initiatives that have already proven to work well, plus a bit more, the new ways of doing things, because we are facing a new situation. We are now reacting to the losses experienced by residents and businesses and government. And with the one-time funds, we can do a bit of addressing that, and as well thinking about how we go about using funds that are available to us now that might carry us a little bit further if we invest them in a way that we have not known as of yet. And that's partly to be discovered. So the timeline that we have for these ARPA funds allow us to do that, allow us to use the funds that we have now, and then think further about how we might use the second tranche. So that would be comparable kinds of workshops and something different, because as we open up and we are able to go out into the community, we can also gain a different perspective in a different time with the funds that we will have received next year, the second half of this. So coming back to 2.3 million, and attempting to address some of the concerns that were heard this morning from people making public comments, as well as recognizing that there are ongoing, obvious infrastructure needs that the city has, and that would, if attended, support both the residents and the businesses. And also recognizing that there is information yet to be received by the city, and that's for use by staff as well as for information to the public. Setting aside some funding among that 2.3 so that we can make decisions about that, not today, but let's see, probably mid-year into next year, once we've gotten some results of some of the assessments. So I'm thinking about the 2.3 being divided again in 3 areas. Staff had made some recommendations. Some very specific examples include that gift card approach. And to add to what Councilmember Tate said, it's the idea of recirculating funds locally and supplementing, not subsidizing entirely, but supplementing what a small business would also invest or contribute and adding to that, and this gets down to into the weeds. So I think one of my request would be for staff to further investigate and let us know how the actual use of the relationship between the small businesses, the city, and the residents in that kind of program, the gift cards, so that the way those are used reflects all these three components involved in assisting each other. It's the small businesses, the city, and the residents. To the extent that we can have other programs that do that, and also offer some degree of immediate response to need, even though we may not have identified who is the neediest. That's the kind of program, I think, that offers a more fair, wider distribution of public funding. With regard to grants and loans, I fall back to existing services or organizations that have been in the business of addressing loans and grants to small businesses with more experience than this city has had, to determine where that need is. Because again, the represented number of businesses that we have heard, I think perhaps I heard one very, very honest comment that the small business that I'm going to take as truly most honest, and that is that we're talking about a certain number of small businesses along the Old Town section, in the Old Town section of our city, that over the years, not just recently, not just after COVID, but even pre-COVID, have experienced the need to do more, to have the city complement what they're doing, because they are small businesses. That gets us into increased traffic. Even pre-COVID, we know we've needed increased people traffic to get to those services and to those businesses. And then the question becomes, what services and products are even on San Pablo and Old Town? That's a larger discussion that needs to be had once that strategy from the consultant doing the economic development work, along with our new community development director, is going to phase and try to translate to us, having identified actual ways to work with that benefit in the long run. So I started saying that I was going to approach the 2.3 million for this year. And so I'm thinking of the three areas again. The immediate need to small businesses and residents in ways that involve the city, them, either business or resident, and can continue having funds circulate. So that's about 700,000, kind of matching what Mayor Pro Tem Salimi kind of outlined. He was a little bit more specific. But the three areas are immediate need, about 700,000. About 700,000 in addressing infrastructure and support those larger projects that again benefit residents and businesses, and that are partly reflected in our capital improvement plan, to the extent that we have allowable use of it for ARPA-related funds. And then another third with ARPA-related funds. And then the other third is to defer the funds, hold on to them until we hear further from the results of the studies that we've got underway. That will take us into next year. And then next year, again, we have ongoing discussions about that second tranche, because we will, I'm hoping, have be a little bit more illuminated about what findings there are additional to any surveys or conversations that we might have with regard to where need is. And along with those conversations and those consultant studies, that we will have also the opportunity to do something different than reaching out, but rather going out and having the exchanges that we need to have more directly with residents and businesses. And that it has to do with how COVID safe it will be to do that, because I know that's been a limitation that we have all had. So that's what I can tell you, my reaction. It is not an easy thing to think about. We could have 2.3 million times 100, and we would be having comparable conversations or exchanges. I think there is a degree of uncertainty in which we operate, and we will always have that, but we will also have a little bit more information and news that comes along. For example, last night's news, and I think HDL can let us know a bit more about the national level legislation that might help us with infrastructure projects, as an example. But we are asked to have a bit of discretion about how these funds are used or to be used, and some judgment about that. And I think that is going to be most necessary when in that third portion that I'm suggesting we set aside for later use, because we don't know today necessarily what's going to be coming our way, even 6 months or a year from now, in terms of world conditions, whether we enter into indeed a recession additional to what we need, what we're facing now in times of needed recovery. There are those economic worldwide conditions that also eventually affect us. And so I want to also have some, in a way, a sense of knowing that we have some one-time funds that can be accessed, that are on hold for us to use in ways that don't have us dip into a general fund, because we know that general fund is going to be diminished increasingly if we do not make the wiser choice about these one-time monies. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'm going to call upon Mr. Foster, because we haven't heard from him, and then go back to council. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mayor. Just a few comments, comment on some of the comments that were made by speakers today, and then also the City Council. Just in terms of the surveys, and so we've done, I think we've done 7 or 8 drafting of business surveys for cities. Right now, we're currently working for 14 different cities in ARPA across the state, and so in drafting those surveys, trying to really kind of assess what the impact was on the local businesses, and then using staff to go ahead and distribute the surveys. But what we've seen really is kind of we've had a low of 15 responses in one city, and then up to a high of over 300 in one city. And the range really has kind of been in that 40 to 75 range. And, I think what we're hearing is a lot of businesses are just scrambling and trying to run their businesses, and they're not always responding to those surveys. And so we all get busy, and we're all trying to juggle and do multiple things. But we still do look at and see those responses and trying to, it's not the total piece in terms of what we're looking for in terms of offering up suggestions for funding, but just, one more tool. And then we've only completed one community survey, one for Pinole second, and then there's 3 more that we're in right now. We're getting ready to kick off. But again, I think the community survey, we tried to keep it kind of simple for residents to do, so they would take the time to do it. And so again, we just seen in the one that we did already completed, we had 3,000 responses, and that's a community that's very, very engaging in everything that they do. And so I think that reflected that. But and that survey is still open in Pinole, and we're doing a couple more with cities with community surveys too. But again, it's another piece to the puzzle in terms of feedback that a city can get and use to look to see how they want to allocate these funds. And you've got your first tranche of funds now, and another one coming next summer. And again, a lot of folks have commented, you don't need to allocate it all now. You have a lot of flexibility. The finance director commented about there's some legislation out there. I think last night the national infrastructure bill was actually approved. And so it's taken months to get that done. There's been a lot of internal movement in terms of what that was going to turn out to be, shaping it and everything else. But there's a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed last night. That's great news. We still need to kind of dig into it and find out what was actually approved. And then to kind of piggyback on that, there's some legislation nationally that could revise ARPA too. And so the Senate 2 weeks ago approved Senate Bill 3011 nationally. That it's to provide more flexibility for ARPA. And so that revenue loss calculation that you folks have done and that we verified, they may tweak that a little bit in terms of what revenue loss can be. We'll see what it's going to do in terms of general government services. And then they're also looking to broaden some of the eligible uses. So right now with ARPA, eligibility for infrastructure it's very focused, it's very narrow. It's water, sewer, and it's broadband. And so it's very, very focused. Some of those traditional infrastructure projects like roads and sidewalks and some of those things are not eligible. But and again, it got passed by the Senate 2 weeks ago. The first day it was considered, it was unanimous approval. It went to the House, and the House has been stuck with this infrastructure bill, and so there's a lot of jockeying and maneuvering there too. We're pretty confident that something's going to get adopted, and that that adoption will broaden some of the eligible uses, including infrastructure, to the point where you can use it for roads and sidewalks and some other kinds of things. And so, we're still trying to kind of figure all those things out, what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and all that too. So, but again, there's no rush to spend it all now or even allocate it all now. I think having that flexibility to really understanding what's happening with this legislation, but then more importantly, all the different assessments that the city's doing to look at infrastructure and other kinds of things that you can fund will be really important to make sure that you've got all the information to make those kind of wise decisions. Somebody talked about essential workers. Public safety right now currently is not considered an essential worker. They were under the CARES Act. Under ARPA, they're not. And so unless they're working more than 50% of their time with that kind of COVID pandemic environment, they really have tightened that up. You can use it under the revenue loss calculation. You could fund that. But essential workers are more grocery stores, folks working in drugstores, healthcare workers, those kinds of things. It's got very tight under ARPA, and we'll have to see what happens with the new legislation, and maybe there's some broadening of that, but just to point that out. And certainly just our kind of take on grants and loans. Grants are much easier for the city to work with, to administer. They're certainly preferred from businesses. And so, looking at a structure there, working with a couple communities right now where they're doing small business grants to help with rent assistance. That certainly is an immediate need. Even the folks that responded to the survey, a lot of folks are behind on their rents. And so that's a common problem across the state with small businesses to look at that. So that the programs that we're looking to structure, the money would go actually directly to the landlord. So the business is getting it paid for. They also have to put a plan in place on how they're going to get caught up on their rent. So you're not just giving them money, but you have a plan in terms of what that investment's going to get and how the business is going to survive and prosper. And so there's a lot of ways you can kind of structure that. The last thing is the e-gift card program. We're actually getting ready to do a pilot project in Lafayette And so we've been working with that for a couple of months on that. And we're looking to do gift card programs in a few other cities. And so as we look out there, the best available program that we've seen is run by a company called Yifty. They're based in Menlo Park, so in Silicon Valley. They're probably doing e-gift card programs for 40, maybe 50 cities in the in California. They do work nationally too, but and they're adding those constantly. There's a lot of folks that are looking to use ARPA funds to help with gift programs. And really the beauty of doing the e-gift card programs is it gives your resident something, but then it ripples into your business community. So the structure is where they would do a buy one, get one free. You can have the nominations be 10, 20, $50, whatever it is. So the resident would buy one for, say, let's say for $20, and then you're using ARPA funds to give them another gift card for another $20. So it's a $40 investment. And so ARPA's making that investment. There's a percentage point fee that UFT gets for managing the program. And it's really important as we've looked at UFT that they have the best customer service rating out there of anybody doing this. And so very engaging. And a lot of communities, Benicia done a couple rounds of these. Concord's done a couple of rounds of these. Newark, so there's some places kind of close to Pinole, the city council, and Lafayette is approved and working with a two-person council subcommittee there, the pilot project. So they're going to devote $30,000 there for that pilot project. And so, and it can only be used for local businesses. Businesses need to agree to it, to take the gift card. So that will take away the large places like Target and some of those places because they're not going to get their corporate approval to do that. So it's really kind of focused on the small businesses. You can target certain types of business categories, restaurants, whatever it is that you want to target. But that money is residents get the benefit of the buy one, get one free. So you're giving them something. You're not giving everybody money, but you're also having them make somewhat of an investment buying that first one. And then, but it has that rippling effect that really helps your business community, which I think is huge right now, and especially with small businesses. And then it's all done, with an e-gift card, so there's no paper thing, and this makes it a lot easier. So I think that I would recommend that you do a pilot project and kind of gauge the impact, get this thing rolling, and then you can go back and you can fund more later in bigger dollars and all that. But I think a number of the council members talked about putting monies in and kind of allocating things, and I think that we would certainly recommend that too, at least as we kind of structure this program and recommendations for the city council working with your staff, taking some feedback from other communities, looking at the surveys that we've done, listening to comments for both the workshops, listening to comments from city council members, and putting a plan together. But there's no rush to spend it all now. There's going to be other, the possibility of kind of tweaking ARPA and making it more flexible, which I think we would all agree can be a very good thing. Looking at the infrastructure bill and what that impact has in terms of funding things, completing all the assessments that you're working on and trying to understand those things too. Just being really wise and strategic in what you're doing and kind of spreading that over time. But I think the immediate needs are what a lot of communities that we're working with are trying to do now. So look at those immediate needs. Look at small businesses and trying to come up with a structure to help the most needed there with grants and helping with back rent and some of those things and the e-gift card programs. But then also looking at social needs, working with your nonprofits and figuring out who in your community is the most need. Working with the food bank at Concert County. There's a number of cities that we're working with that are talking to them. They have those already kind of established networks. They know who's the most in need. The Meals on Wheels programs. And a lot of those nonprofits they really have a good gauge on who needs help the most and kind of that immediate need. So it's helping, it's listening to them and engaging those and establishing those partnerships, I think are really, really important. So just some thoughts from us that I thought you might want to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Foster, for your comments. Council Member Tate?
I'm sorry, I think Mayor Pro Tem was next.
Mayor Pro Tem Salimi?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Foster, for your comment. I just want to clarify something about the my table and my allocation, and I was wondering if I can share my screen. I created a little table, and it's easier for me to share that table with you in public than having to talk and just throw you numbers. Can I please share my screen? Thank you. So let me bring and make it big enough so that everybody gets to see it. Can you see my screen at this moment? And I don't know if it's, yes, can you?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. Mr. Foster, I do agree that social workers, it's not part of police, fire, and public work are not part of the social workers. But I will just make a little modifications to the language. Instead of providing item number 1, $500 to public safety, I would just provide it to public safety and related staff. And public safety and related staff is part of the American Rescue Plan, and the money will be dedicated as part of ARPA, as part of the support of public health responses. And that type of money can be allocated to our public safety. So my plan initially, as I mentioned, we have $4,605,010 to be spent. The item in red are the item that I would like to spend immediately, and the item in black are the item that I would like to defer at a later time. Item 1, as I said, is $500 bonus to public safety and related staff of $50,000 now. Item number 2, that's for 2022 small business grant, up to $3,000 to 100 businesses. Sorry for the typo here, I did it very fast. That's $300,000 now. Item number 3 will be spent later in 2023. Again, that's $300,000 to 100 businesses. Item number 4, it's to be spent right now, is to help the people in Pinole. $300 up to 100 families in the city of Pinole to be spent now. Item number 5, it's again another $300 to be spent in 2023 at a later time to up to 1,000 families in Pinole. Item number 6 is support health, public health again. And this has to do with the costs associated to providing those COVID-19 tests and everything else that the city had to encounter related to COVID-19. That's $100,000 to be spent now. Item number 7 is the same item to be spent in 2023. Item number 8 is infrastructure for $1 million to be spent later, and we can discuss about it. Item number 9 is city loss of revenue of $2,155,000 and $10, which is close to what finance director has suggested to us to do. That's total equal to $4,605,000 and $10. The money to be spent right now, Madam Mayor, will be those items in red, which is $750,000. And the rest can be spent at a later time with the rest of the council. And we'll still be left with $2,155,000 and $10 for loss of city revenue that the city staff can come back to us and suggest us on how to spend it. And that refers back to the numbers from what we received from the finance director. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
If I will stop sharing my screen unless somebody has a question.
I have regarding the layout that Mayor Pro Tem put in. Can we see and I don't know if it's possible, that screen that showed the survey, I know that we had, you know, a limited amount of people that responded based on our, you know, our sample set. But I'd like to see what that looks like as far as the percentage of what everybody, what that survey came back with. Because I'm looking at this and I'm kind of the mind, do we capture the city loss of revenue and then have further discussions as to how to allocate that while we're going through that process? Because I feel like there's a lot more that we need to flush out, right, as to how these programs will work. And it's going to take time to do that. And I need to know how much time, you know, from staff. And I'd like staff to at least comment as to, you know, if we were to go with the city loss revenue, how quickly can we implement some of these programs that Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem mentioned and that the council has mentioned? And just kind of like timeline what that would mean. And then as the rest of the money comes in, how do we start supporting infrastructure and the other items that we're talking about? Because I do believe we have to get some type of immediate help out there. I'm just trying to figure out to what scale, because if we jump out there and give a bunch of money out and it's not effective, you know, we're not going to get another shot at this, right? Like, I want to make sure that when we do this, it's done properly and well thought out. Just my comments on the screen, but if we could see that one more time, and just for the public and everybody to, not just this, but the how the surveys came back.
And that's the community survey, right?
That's correct. That's correct. It sounds
Yeah. Well, yeah. And my thoughts as this is being pulled up, that even that reflects how you know, it's a reflection of, you know, who you ask is going to answer based on how they were individually affected. And the upside of looking at even those numbers, the 21 people who responded, is that they're not in a terrible shape, so to speak. But we know that we want to address the most needy, right? And that's the big question. So, you know,
looking at this, the backfill of lost revenue was one of the major components, right? That gives us the flexibility of the council to hear more. And you know, I think that you know, the comments we received today is more right on message. You know, education is we have to unpack that. I mean, we have to get Trustee Smith-Holds in the conversation. I mean, that's a lot larger, but when people mention parks, that ties into that, right? Programs that we can potentially partner with the school district. A while back, we talked about teacher housing. I'm not sure if that's in play, but that's something that if the school district's interested in, we need to have that discussion again now that we have monies to help prompt that. Looking at the infrastructure, it's no secret, right? We know where we are, we have to start investing in it. So looking at this survey and Mayor Pro Tem's chart, it's now about how long will it take to implement this stuff and how much money are we going to allocate for the immediate need, and then how are we going to plan to make sure that we do a more robust program and roll out later. The water, I mean, obviously I've been an advocate of recycled water, but I think there's something to be said about how we ramp up to that, right? And with all the activity going on at the federal level, I don't think we should take our eyes off of recycled water, you know, or you know what I mean, as far as attention. But I think we need to be poised for something to happen soon, because I think that there is funding that's going to be coming for those type of projects, as broadband as well. So the broadband discussion could be a larger discussion with the school district as well. If there's multiple agency investment, and it's more of a regional thing than necessarily just one city trying to tackle this on our own. But those discussions, you know, you can only have one discussion at one time, right? And it seems like we're trying to have, you know, 15 all at once. But I would look to staff to help structure this based on our priorities so that we can start tackling these one at a time and get some value. But we do have to, in a sense, prime our community. We have a lot of things here that we need to tackle, and we need their input. And it's going to have to be a constant engagement with them, which I believe our community development director is up to the task. So.
And that alone, the amount of exchange is part of that timeline. So you asked for staff to react or comment on, let's take one example. Let's take one of these things. Let's take the immediate need. Allotting some funding to the small businesses, for example. How much time is it going to take to roll out anything and make those grants and/or / loans, if any, out there? Let's have staff react to that, just to give people an illustration of what does happen behind the scenes, what is necessary to be done. Immediate in and of itself has different definitions and understandings.
So my reaction to that would be using the small business grant as an example, because that is a program that we have launched already, right? So if that's an immediate need, we can definitely make that a priority and start to work on it. I think that can be done in the short term. It's just a matter of fleshing out the criteria for that program, similar to what we did for the previous small business assistance program. So if that is the direction of the city council to make that a priority and to fulfill that immediate need, we can get started on that. And I don't foresee that taking longer than 60 days to get that rolling. And again, this is just based on the last program, which it would be similar to that. And in connection with that, I guess the e-gift card program, if we went with that too, is something that we could roll out. And if we're going to go in that direction, the timing is pretty good because the holidays are coming up. And so that's one way to kind of boost the local economy a little bit.
If I can just ask one thing, Mayor Pro Tem, can you add 60 days next to those two items, and then we can kind of use that Excel spreadsheet that you outlined? And then try to put timelines to some of this stuff. Nothing committal, we're not committing to anything, just kind of generally what we can roll out and how quickly we can do it. Just for conversation's sake.
I will add within 60 days instead of now.
Okay.
Thank you. You see, this is
are you
where we
talking about
need to
business
talk.
days or are you talking about working days? Are you talking about working days or calendar days? I need to know.
Working days.
Yeah,
definitely working.
Okay, so 60 working days, that's actually 3 months, not 2 months. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful illustration of why we need to talk to each other about what we mean, time-wise, and then importantly, for the businesses themselves. So we're talking about beginning of the year, really, to have something with the e-gift exchange card maybe a lot sooner. All right, so Councilmember Thomas?
Sure, thank you. I wanted to react to the spreadsheet and thank Mayor Pro Tem for providing it. So the small business grant of up to $3,000 to 100 businesses, I think that's good. I think we need to make sure that it's not $3,000 flat across the board, because different businesses have different numbers of employees, different energy costs, different costs for licenses. So I would like to see a program that is really based on some of their expenses. Perhaps in the calculation there's an amount that they pay for their business license, which is also based on the number of employees, their health licenses. That I think it should be tiered, because the single self-employed individual is going to have a different expenses and different losses than, say, a business that is a restaurant or coffee shop or bakery or bar that has more employees. So I'd like to see it really based on on some of those criteria. The Help for Pinole Households grant, I would like to see that actually, the e-gift card, that's where that, fits, because if it's a 2-for-1, the resident is getting, help, and then they in turn are spending that in Pinole. Whereas if we just do a cash grant, they could take that money and spend it outside of our city. And if that is, how we use that, it benefits both the resident and the businesses. The support for public health, I have a question, is that why is the city paying for testing of employees when testing is covered for free if you go through CVS or any of those organizations, or your insurance? It's billed against insurance, and I'm not excited about subsidizing somebody's decision not to be vaccinated. I understand that there are situations, but there's other, I want to make sure that we're using these funds and not spend money on things that other parties are already providing. And then my last item might not be popular with some folks, and that's the $500 bonus for public safety and related staff. And it's not that I'm that I'm insensitive to that issue. I myself am considered an essential worker, and I worked 7 days a week for 2.5 months. I was fortunate that I was still employed. As a public employee, you are an essential you're an emergency services worker. That's part of your job. And to give bonuses, as public agencies typically don't give bonuses. So to provide a bonus under this situation for public employees, but not the grocery store worker, I'm troubled by that. These are employees that did have the benefit of, they didn't get laid off. So if we can roll that amount and increase the amount of small business grants for those workers, in businesses, I think that really where we should look. The remainder, I would like to consider, the e-gift card. Maybe we have a smaller amount that we roll out and we see how successful it is. And then when we do one of our quarterly reviews, we can increase the funds at that point. We don't have to allocate everything at this point. So that's kind of where I'm looking, for a smaller amount, whether it's $600,000 or $700,000, to maybe see if we can program that as early as today, if we're allowed to, through a workshop, or if it has to be, at a future agenda item. I'd like to hear that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that the use of ARPA funds, as suggested here on this chart, was not going to be allowable. So for to put that number 1 up there, that line. So Mr. Foster, can you clarify? Because I think of other reasons why that is not something that I would favor. Most recently, we went through a round of labor negotiations, and we did our best to try to ensure that the staff that's currently in those groups are adequately compensated, given what we know that they are responsible to do.
Yeah, again, ARPA is a little bit different than the CARES Act was previously. The CARES Act had a much broader eligibility for spending in terms of public safety for police and fire. So they would not qualify for ARPA funds. You could use your revenue loss piece that could be funded through that, but ARPA doesn't allow that. You need to be an essential worker, they're not an essential worker. And so unless they're working 50% or more of their time on COVID-related pandemic type of things. And so, again, you're gonna have to kind of track that and figure that out.
May I ask a question? Sorry, I just want to clarify. The ARPA funds allows us to spend money on support public health response.
Public health, but not public safety.
So public health response includes public safety. And it's not, I'm looking at the messages, and I want to make sure that we go inside of what ARPA says and make sure that public safety. I'm looking at documents that shows me that public safety is part of the support of the public health response. I just want to. I might be wrong. I may have to go through more documents, but if you can clarify and just get back to us, make sure that public safety is not included. I agree, it's not part of essential workers. I don't agree. I agree with you, but is public safety part of supporting the public health response? That's what my question is. Thank you.
Again, to qualify, they would have to spend 50% or more of their time related to pandemic, COVID, all those kinds of things to qualify for public health, for public safety.
So as an example, are people who are in clinics. I mean, that's the most direct example. Yeah. Who are actually doing the testing or administering tests or following up with contact tracing. Those are the kinds of examples that are clear with regard to public health use.
Correct. And again, if the city chose to do that, they could fund, if you wanted to do something for public safety, with the revenue loss piece, you could fund that. There's not all the ties and restrictions that you have with eligibility under the ARPA programs. You could use it. You could fund it under if that's the direction and desire of the city council, under the revenue loss piece.
So I would take away this bonus component as well off of this, and I would augment the area where we're talking about assistance to households. Again, it's based on needed households that need these fundings, these funds, and with regard to, gosh, how do I want to phrase this? I'm going back to my thoughts during the earlier ARPA workshop in October, and that's addressing food insecurity and assistance to people who might be on that verge of losing shelter, their homes, if at all possible, because they can't make this month's rent. Even that assistance might be welcome, but I don't know enough. I don't think we know enough about where those folks are, where the people are. So that's where I would put the funds for more immediate need among the residents who need them. So where does this take us? I think back to let's take a look at the kinds of recommendations that have been made already, keeping in mind that we have much more work to do to identify or pinpoint how money will actually be spent. I don't think we have, this would be the time to identify the programming or the structure. That's some of what we can ask staff to do for us and bring back to us. And I think with any area that we choose to sort of large bucket, assign some funding, that we will still want to find out what is going on within our city, what is going on legislatively as we go through the year of using some of these monies. But back to this bucket of the immediate need, I think we've kind of identified two and thought of piloting some and expanding on the grant comparable to what was provided last year, knowing that we need criteria to be determined, knowing that there are X number of I think we have close to 1,000 businesses on our business license database. Please, someone let me know, staff-wise, from staff. And we only heard from 21. You know, ideally, we want to be about a 30% response on any survey. We're not going to get that necessarily. So we need to complement information that we do have with information that can be obtained in the background that we know about from with regard to the types of businesses that exist here in Pinole. We know we won't be hearing from all of them because they don't all need the funding. Some of them have done fairly well or have managed to even improve upon their services during the times when they didn't have the foot traffic. And the flip side of that is that we hear from others who weren't able to for whatever reason, whether it's their aptitude to conduct a business at all, whether it's their short term here at Pinole, whatever that might be, we still need to come up with some criteria to help us kind of work through that. Some public comment will have to do with identifying minority-based businesses. My question to staff here, I believe we do not have, or please correct me if we have that piece of information in what we collect when licenses are due. Do we ask if a business is a minority-owned business? Because if we don't, that's another piece of information that we can use to also help us hone in on addressing, not only because it's a minority-based business, but because there is a need based on whatever we use that helps us have an indication that a revenue loss was related to COVID or associated with COVID, not only because of the duration of that business in town or whatever other areas of business development they needed to learn, but now has been heightened because of COVID. You know, so many circumstances contribute to how well businesses do or not, but the ones that we have heard about again and again, even pre-COVID, aren't necessarily related to one thing. The lack of foot traffic is something that's been in existence much longer. It's been enhanced though, certainly because of the COVID requirements of having people not around to shop and to buy and to consume. We also have the circumstance of online, the trend of online shopping, and how will our small businesses be affected by that, or how have they been affected by that? And how can we complement the fact that given COVID, there is increasing use of online services? Do we have small businesses capable of using online systems to help them? And if not, that is an area of need, again, by some more than others. Okay, enough from me for that, about that. Councilmember Tate?
Excuse me, Mayor, may I answer your questions before?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we currently have 1,100 businesses in the database. And to your second question, no, the application does not ask if the business is minority owned or women owned.
Is there anything, and this may be for City Attorney Casher or in complement, if you can get back to us, if there's anything that keeps us from asking that question for this next round of small business applications into next year? I'm sorry, not small business applications, licenses, because it's going to be license renewal time. So that'll give us an opportunity to either add a question to the license application for renewal or for new, or not use it at all. But I just don't know why we haven't been asking that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I'll just briefly offer, we can certainly ask the question and include that on anything. I would need to look into and advise on whether or not that's a requirement, so that if we can, I don't know that we can require that they provide that information, but we could certainly ask the question and it can be voluntarily provided in response to the application or anything that we put out. So yeah, that's my answer for now, but I can look into that as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that answer. And yes, please, for looking into it, both staff.
Okay, Councilmember Tate.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because as the mayor's talking, I'm wondering how many of those businesses are landlords renting? Can you differentiate the two? Because I see those as two separate elements. One thing that we know is landlords have been impacted, right, by this, but there was a significant amount of rental assistance that went out already for the federal government. So there have been business owners in that class that are renting that have been benefiting from throughout COVID. And to add an additional benefit is kind of, I'm trying to figure out, what that balance is and what that number may look like. And then differentiating that group with the group that are businesses that are employing people and not only just housing people, right? Is there a number? Is there a way to give us that number? And I'd like to well, first give me that number, and then I'll make another comment because I'd like to try to move us along.
Okay, I'll just have to filter out that information.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is make a motion, and then that way, because I think we're all settled in on the grants and the card. From the comments that I'm hearing, I'd like to make a motion to issue $600,000 now to start for the grant program, or to expand that grant program, and to issue a gift card program to be developed by staff and brought back to council for approval.
It is for businesses or for families?
I'm sorry, for businesses.
Second.
Okay, so time for discussion. I would not favor that amount. Again, I'm thinking about of the $2.3 million that we have to think about, that we can't think about now, to use some portion of that toward the businesses, some portion of that toward, some portion of that toward immediate relief, including businesses, small businesses and families. A third of that. So I'm thinking about 700,000 max of that 2.3 to be used for immediate relief. So to allocate the most amount to grant as grants to small businesses, to me is more than we. Well, actually, I shouldn't say this. The small businesses would be glad to take that amount, but I just don't think it's the best distribution of the funds, knowing that there are also needs by residents. And I'm thinking about programming that for possible assistance with food-related programs and shelter somehow, rents associated somehow.
So I think if I can comment on that, I think that we have 1.7 million to discuss after this motion. I understand the amount might be high, but it is serving two purposes. Is the reason why I went with 600,000. What I'm trying to do is break up the issues so that we can allocate funds associated with it. But I understand. Is there maybe a substitute? Would you like to see another number?
For the grants, I would go. Let's think about expanding and improving what we offered last year. Okay, which was only 100,000. Let's see how better we can use the information that we have about the types of business and categories of businesses. So I'm thinking more along the lines of what was previously suggested, which was 300,000 at most. For now, because that gives us an idea. That'll give us an opportunity to further test out how receptive businesses will be and what information they're willing to provide us in exchange about how they will use the funds. Recall too that you and all of us, I think, are interested in finding out how impactful, how helpful those funds will be to them. And for them to let us know that it's going to take another amount of time to find that out. And so that's some of what I'm thinking about.
I hear you. I hear you. I'm just thinking to myself that staff is collecting this data, you know, and these comments that would come back with a program to roll. What I'm trying to do is lock in a certain amount of money to be so that we have action moving forward from this meeting.
Yeah, and I'm favoring it about 300,000.
Okay.
Yeah, to start. Yeah, Councilmember Thompson.
I was going to say if the motion can be amended to for right now for just the small business grant program for 300,000, I could support that. And if the form of the program comes back to the council, you know, I would appreciate that as well.
Is there a reason why you want to or not eliminate, but defer the 300,000 for the gift card program?
I think it's a high number for now. I'd like to see the gift card program. I mean, $300,000 for gift cards, that's a huge amount. I'd like to allocate about 100,000 right now as a pilot, and then possibly increase it in a few months if we see that it's successful.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, yeah, I would support that.
We're really looking at 300,000 for grants and 100,000 for the gift card pilot to handle that. That sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, where there are conditions for the grants. I mean, it's grants because it's immediate relief, but there will be a request to have the businesses come back and, you know, inform us about how they are using. And we will also find out which businesses are going to be involved in this. You know, it's not going to be just the 21 that responded. It's going to be more than that.
Yeah.
So we'll have more to work with, more information to work with, if you will, more familiarity with those businesses.
Well, I agree. I think that 400,000, but I'd like to hear from Mayor Pro Tem too, just because I think we're centering in on a reasonable plan moving forward. I just want to see if we can move forward with the vote.
Well, we've had some discussion now, and now I think we go to a vote. So the motion.
Well, I think Councilmember.
He has to agree to the second, to the amendment.
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear from Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I just want to clarify what the motion and the amendments are so that everybody knows what we are voting on. Initially, the motion was to allocate $300,000 immediately to small businesses program. That's what I seconded on, and then the conversation moved on, and I want to make sure that what we are voting on is what I seconded. Can you please restate the motion?
So the motion was to assign 600,000 for grant program, 300,000 for grant, 300,000 for business, the gift card program. Since that time, we're talking, and Councilmember Thompson mentioned to do 300,000 for grants for immediate assistance, and then 100,000 for the gift card pilot program that would be expanded once we get some data to kind of course correct if there's issues, glitches, problems, problems with the program or ways to enhance it. So we would get data back and then revisit.
Okay. Will $100,000 also go to, I lost internet connection for a minute, sorry, I missed some of the conversation. Is the $100,000 also going toward the businesses or just for families?
I think we're just talking about businesses at this point.
Okay, businesses, okay.
And then we have approximately 1.9 million, it looks like, to have a discussion after we get through this motion and kind of solidify the business portion.
I hear you. Mine, I just want to restate my initial plan was $200,000 immediately this for 2022 and $300,000 additional for businesses in 2023, but for a total of $600,000 is to businesses. That was my initial plan.
Well, okay. Ms. Mayor.
Can we go back to the motion, please? and then take it from there to see if there's an amendment based on the discussion?
So what I would like to do is amend it to $300,000 for immediately, and $300,000 for 2023. And the form of distribution can be at the discretion of the city council.
You're running out of time.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that because there was some background.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're trying to get ready for soccer. Yeah, Mayor Protest, can you run that back again?
Yes, thank you. I would like to amend it to spend $300,000 in 2022 for small businesses and $300,000 in 2023 for small businesses, for a total of $600,000. And the form of distribution can be at the discretion of the city council, and we can discuss it at a later time.
Okay, so that's an amendment to your motion, Councilmember Tate.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning more towards, so there's two motions, and Eric, help me out when there's, do we have to vote on if we accept the amendment, or how does that work, or is this a substitute motion?
Councilmember Tate, so it's your motion that was seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Salimi. If you'd like to amend your motion, as previously stated, then you can call for a second of your amended motion, and there can be a discussion and then vote on that amended motion.
Okay, so I'd like to second this Mayor Pro Tem so that we can actually have a discussion and vote on that one. Then roll up to, if it passes or fails, then roll up to the amendment that Councilmember Thomas made. Is that the order that we would go in?
Yeah, that's fine. So Mayor Pro Tem's, that was a motion. You'd like to second his motion. So you're kind of, you're taking your prior motion off the table. You're going to second Mayor Pro Tem's motion, and there'll be discussion of that now.
Okay, great. Okay, so
to clarify though, if I were to second Councilmember Tave's amended motion, could we move forward on that?
So that technically came before Mayor Pro Tem's motion. So yes, if you second his motion, then that would then be what's discussed and voted on.
Okay, I'd like to second the motion that involves $300,000 for small business grant program and $100,000 for the e-gift card program.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and now we can discuss that motion or take a vote.
Okay, if I may, I just wanted to indicate that I may be in favor of, allocating funds into the next fiscal year, but let's worry about this current fiscal year right now. In today's meeting, I'm really interested in just the allocation of the 2.3 million that we have already have on the books, and expenditures for 2023. We have plenty of time to discuss that, review the programs that we're voting on now, and perhaps expand that when we do the 2022-2023 budget in June. So that's why I'm supportive of the initial motion of the expenditure of $400,000 total. Thanks.
And Ms. Mayor, if I can, I agree with Councilmember Thomas. I think that getting the information back is important for us to kind of gauge where we're going to go with this. The reason why I understand that this stuff can be, both programs will be helpful, right? But I think that I was looking more towards, and why I seconded Mayor Pro Tem was that we could have that discussion and vote. I'm more in favor of taking a more practical, calculated approach versus trying to span this over 2 years, because we frankly don't know what 2023 is going to look like. So the reason why I second was to have that discussion, but I'm in favor of exactly my original motion with the amended portion.
Thank you. So I would agree. So can we have, if there's no other discussion, then
Mayor, before there's a vote, there are some public comments. Did you want to take those?
No.
City Attorney Casher, we are in the of voting.
This is City Clerk Bell. I'm going to need some clarification. We've had a couple motions discussed, and I'm trying to make sure that the record is accurate. The way that I understand the motion on the floor at this time, it was made by Councilmember Tave to allocate $300,000 for small business loans, and originally $300,000 for gift cards. It was then amended by Councilmember Toms down to $100,000 for gift cards. Councilmember Tape has accepted that amendment, and now that is the current motion on the table. So I wanted to clarify that before we get into public comment and a vote. Thank you.
Thanks for asking, because my understanding is that the $300 was not for loans but for grants. So that's one thing that I want to double check on. Yes, I
Thank you.
Some nods, and then the 100, yes, for the e-gift card. So that's what we've got.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, and so now my question to City Attorney Casher with regard to accepting public comment before we vote, given that we've got a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so typically, it's now up for discussion at the council level. So we have a motion second, there's discussion amongst the council. And so typically there would just be a vote on that. Mayor, you can allow for public comment, but it's not something that is typically, it's not required, and it's not typical. It's now, the discussion of this particular item is now with the council, and there's a motion second, and usually there's a vote on that.
Thank you. So I'm going to go with what the council has on the floor and request a roll call vote, please. Madam City Clerk.
Before we vote, can I also just make one differentiation that I started out with to this motion, was that this would be for business owners, not housing or renters, because we do collect a business license fee for renting homes. So this would be for, would it be clear to say storefront businesses, in-home businesses, to add some clarity to that?
Right, and that brings me, thank you for raising that, because that brings me again to this criteria and definition that we need to have. So given that big question mark over our heads, yes, Director Guillory, thank you.
I was just going to mention that there are 262 licenses for rental properties.
Okay, so we're talking then if we can qualify in the motion that we're talking about the storefront businesses.
If I can just clarify that some people work from home, they're not renters, so that it would be somebody who has a business license with a business, and it might be better to just clarify that doesn't include landlords or residential landlords. Maybe that's the criteria. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. We got a thumbs up from our city attorney. Okay, thank you. All right. Now, roll call vote, please, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Toms?
Yes.
Noting for the record that Councilmember Murphy is absent. Councilmember Tave?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Salimi?
Yes.
Mayor Martinez Rubin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to continue a discussion, and that's, if I may, addressing immediate needs for residents. Was there an area there that we wanted to touch on a little bit more? Councilmember Thomas?
Yes, I want to be clear that different jurisdictions have received different funds. Contra Costa County received community development block grant funds, and allocated that for food security. I think for us to duplicate programs, it becomes problematic. The same with, the Housing is Key program. Those are really focused programs where there's lots of budget that has been allocated to those programs. And just in case anybody's wondering about rental relief programs, the website is housing.ca.gov. So I think if we were to attempt to do a program that duplicates something that's out there already, I don't think that that's our best use of revenue. Now, if there's some businesses or residents that don't qualify for some reason with those, we would want to see evidence that there's some special circumstances as to why they have not gone and run up their request to that flagpole. So I'd be interested in finding out, what circumstances would there be that these programs don't work for folks before we go ahead and start allocating funds to another program. And I don't know if we can get that answer today.
Right, because I was thinking along the lines of, again, where is that need, if there is that kind of need at all in Pinole? We know that we've got some assistance related to food security with the food bank involved. And then, of course, there's also, that's probably it. Do we need to augment that? We need to know what Pinole residents are availing themselves of that. Can we obtain that information? And going beyond just food security, but this matter of rents and the problem with rents, where people are trying to prevent people from going, becoming shelterless or homeless. What can we do with these ARPA funds that would allow us to identify residents' needs, if at all, knowing that the response to date in probably 6 months from now is going to be comparable to getting that a few more additional of data on that. Is there anything that we do with these ARPA funds that will get us into a position as a city to know more, one way or another, about is there a need for immediate relief among residents that touches upon assistance to them? Somehow that we just don't know about now, or maybe we don't even go that route until we get into finding the results of the assessments that we have going. I just don't know, and maybe that's the big thing, because I don't know and we don't know. If I can draw you into this or tell me otherwise, then perhaps we don't allot. We'll discuss further about allotment for resident to address resident needs. I just don't want for us to ignore that entirely, because I think that there are people out there that just don't avail themselves of responding to surveys and whatever we're attempting to do, and yet we still hear from some individuals that people do need help. I appreciate knowing and you reiterating, Councilmember Toms, that there are other sources. We don't want to duplicate, exactly. We don't want to duplicate, I agree with you, what other organizations, agencies are already doing or offering. We do want to find out if there is a need in Pinole. And without any other council members' reaction, I think I'm just repeating myself or echoing. Echoing that we just don't know a lot of things here. Councilmember Tate?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot to unpack, right? We have to get a full understanding of the sample data we've received, the comments we've received today. There's a lot of, it seems like there's more questions now, right? I mean, based on the conversation we've been having, which I think is a good thing to have. I'm wondering if the council would like to look at appropriating a amount of money to the general fund earmarked for some of these these topics that we're talking about. I think it's HDL. Let me see here. Where's HDL? Is it Brad?
Barry.
Barry? Barry, can you kind of give us an idea, the topics that you're hearing, if we move that to general fund and go to unearthing some of these topics, what I'm worried about doing when moving money to the general fund is that it tends to get spent on other things, you know, and not spent for what it was meant for. And what I want to make sure is that these topics that we're bringing up, the questions that the mayor and everybody has had, are addressed with that money. How do we, is it an appropriation earmark? Are all these topics qualifying? I mean, or maybe Markeisha, you can.
Yeah, I can respond to that in terms of the mechanism that we have set up to track the funds separately. So even if they are used for services or activities that are typically funded by the general fund, we have set up a separate fund to track the ARPA funding. One, to make sure that we're spending according to guidelines, and two is there's a reporting requirement that we have to do once a year to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So it's really important that we keep it segregated.
Okay. So is it, I don't know if the council is willing, how much money can we talk about putting towards the general fund out of the, I think it's 1.9 that's left over?
We can set aside that balance. We can just set aside for now, not have to decide today, because we are in a situation where we have a lot of unknowns. We don't want to. I think what we all don't want to do is just make rash decisions or feel that pressure to do so without information that is still needed to identify areas of need.
I was going to say that because if the motion is passed to appropriate the $400,000, right, the remainder of that balance is just going to sit in the fund until we appropriate it to other items. So if the goal today is just to address those immediate needs, you've already done that with the motion that was passed.
And you know, just one thing that comes to mind when we talked about food insecurity was we talked about having a garden, a community garden, and that, I don't know if that would even qualify, but it does bring up, well, that would be a food source to feed into the programs that we have. I'm just thinking about all the things that we've said over the past few years that kind of tie right into this funding source, and so. And these are all things that have come from the community, and so it's. I'd like more time, and I think that it might behoove us to move that money over, and then have further discussion on those topics, you know, and make them pointed, you know, to resolution of some of these.
So what I'm hearing, and I'm going to turn to Councilmember Thompson a bit too, is this area of food insecurity could be addressed through different programming. And we need to have a better understanding of the options that we have. And some have been suggested. The garden, but you know, again with that food garden they can take on different forms and shapes, right? And they can involve as many or as few people in that. And there can be different purposes for a food garden. But in and of itself, it's not going to address food insecurity. The question goes back to where is that food insecurity in Pinole? That's what I want to get to. But yeah, let's keep the ideas of programming in mind. And again, because we're not there yet, if staff hears us and the public hears us, is that we still need information to guide as to to answer the question, where is that need? There's census data. We know that people who rent might be in a different socioeconomic level than people who are property owners. That investigation, that research, that assessment, that analysis is the kind of work that we need our staff to do, along with whomever they can help to get us to identify that need. That would be my plea to all of you, fellow council members, and to our staff. You know, we keep hearing that, but we still don't know who that is, I believe. Councilmember Thoms?
Yes, a couple things is, I don't think we need to move funds to the general fund. they're just unallocated. We're just not allocating them at this time. But if you wanted to do something like, a program, a community garden program that didn't fit under the regulations of what, the ARPA funds can be used for, the alternative to that would be, to reimburse the city for funds that we expended, and then it would, that reimbursement would then go to the general fund, and then you could then use general fund money to do a program that doesn't quite fit the rules and regulations of ARPA. And I'm, just getting that. But I think given that we, we have addressed $100,000 of assistance for residents through the gift card program, but we have 5 speakers, public speakers, who are interested in giving public comment, and hopefully if we take that public comment, we may get some other input on this topic.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear. Yeah, we've kind of in a way exhausted our ability to decide one way or another. But we have made a decision, which is really feels like a relief in a way. So I don't know where you see 5 people waiting in the queue to speak. Ms. Stone, do you see those as well?
Yes, there are 5 people
wonderful.
waiting.
So let's hear that, and then we'll kind of wrap up with the help of our with Mr. Foster or Ms. Meyer to tell us where we are. Thank you.
Okay, we will start with David or Irma Ruport.
Good afternoon, council and staff. I would have liked to have spoken prior to your vote on the resolution that you just passed about 5 or 10 minutes ago. I sent all of you an email indicating this. However, I have some real basic questions about that vote, and then other comments, which if I have time to talk about, I will talk about or put in a letter. But this particular meeting, if we go back to basics, like the prior meetings, was advertised as a workshop, and secondarily was advertised as a preliminary staff recommendation for allocating funds. At no point in time, at least when I'm reading quickly, since I just got the reports from the city council a couple of days ago, did it say that you were going to actually take actual economic actions on the ARPA funds which are in question. So I need a legal ruling with specific sites as to why this matter was either discretionary and or not allowed, because I think there could be a violation here. And if Eric Cashier is available to state that this is no violation or potential violation of what I've just stated, then like I said, I will take that as face value for the moment. So I do need an immediate ruling on that. I do have other comments if you want me to talk about them, since I do have some time left. I would like to point out that the decisions you're making right now are being made very hastily. The ARPA funds legislation took months to figure out, and they're still temporary. If you actually look at the content of the act or any of their document, they will be changed. And I noticed that our speaker consultant, Mr. Foster, has hit on lots of those points, which indicates that things will be changed. Therefore, as far as making allocation decisions at this point in time, it's not wise, because you may have to go be doing them again. And due to the fact that this will take a considerable amount of time, and I appreciate every comment that's been put in by council, because they all apropos. The question is cutting them down to something reasonable for the amount of money allocated. It's going to take a long time to do this. And I think you recognize this by the fact that just discussing this one matter, which I think is been taken at the wrong time to vote. But you're going to have to make up the time that you should have taken at the beginning when we were notified by Congressman Thompson and Mayor Rubin knew about this, because I watched them on video talking about this, and we've got a gap of 5 or 6 months, and things will change. And reading my reading of what's been happening the last few days and nights at Congress is we're due for a long period of transition to this act actually being implemented correctly and worked out. So I will write my other comments as indicated later in the letter, but I need a ruling, please. Thank you.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please.
So thank you, Mr. Rupert, for the comment. The city council meeting agenda was agendized as a workshop, and so there's been robust public comment. I think more individual speakers were able to speak on topics more than once, which is consistent with a workshop format. The agenda was noticed as the city council considering staff recommendations. The staff report is very clear on page 7, next steps, that if the city council decides at the November 6th workshop on general or specific types and amounts of ARPA expenditures, the city staff will take the appropriate follow-up steps to advance the initiatives identified by the council. So it was anticipated that there would both be the consideration of the recommendations that were proposed by staff, but then also council direction on how to move forward with any of the expenditures if there was direction provided. So I think that the agenda is consistent with the action that was taken. And my understanding is that some of this will ultimately come back for further city council direction and discussion. So there will be other opportunities to weigh on these items as well. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, City Attorney Castro. Okay, next speaker, please.
Okay, we have a telephone caller, last 4 digits, 5621.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Irma Rupert, and I'm using my phone because I'm not sure my computer is working. I do have a problem with what's going on with this workshop. It's supposed to be for the community. You guys are making decisions too hastily. I think that if you're going to make a decision and make recommendations, put them at the council. This is a Brown Act violation, whichever you want to call it. I disagree with the city attorney. This is wrong. You're not supposed to make decisions and take a vote. It's a recommendation. I don't appreciate the fact that we can't make comments before the vote. You guys this is a workshop, wasting our time for 4 hours, and you making all these decisions and having us wait to make this comment. It's ridiculous. I mean, I think we need to take an art of how to run workshops. I'm totally disgusted with this workshop. You've gone wrong, haywire, whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, do the right thing for the community. You haven't reached out to the community. Some of the things you're talking about, I agree. But it's wrong when not enough community members have had a say. To me, it's wrong. And totally, I disagree with what you're doing. In a Brown Act, yes, these recommendations should not be made. On page 7, it does say you're not supposed to make any vote on it. Where does it say, City Attorney, if you know about the Brown Act? So I'm really upset with you guys, and I'm sorry. A waste of my time. Next time you do a workshop, heaven forbid, you might not have anybody there. It seems like you all taking your own initiative in your own party. Okay? Thank you. Have a good evening.
Next comment, please.
Next comment is from Eric.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and distinguished council members. I've been a Pinole resident for 33 years, and I've seen local elected officials come and go. But for the most part, in 3 decades I've been living in Pinole, it's been a well-run city government, making thoughtful, insightful, and fiscally sound decisions. As I agree with most of the comments made, and I really appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem's detailed outline of how he recommended to spend the funds. And my fellow Pinole residents echoed exactly what I would have said: public safety, small business, the residents, police, fire, public works, and the infrastructure, basically. I just want to say that all you have to do is look at San Francisco. Escalating lawlessness. They've driven out small businesses. Big businesses are leaving. Thank God we're still not at that phase, but I just implore this city council to preserve, improve, and protect the safety and quality of life in Pinole and keep it going. One thing I would say on a negative note is, please, please leave that minority business. I mean, when you want to help businesses, don't include like race and gender. Every tax-paying small business in Pinole should be considered and offered the courtesy and respect of being offered these funds if they need it, regardless of race, gender. I'm a person of color, but I advocate fairness and equality without all these little things that call diversity, that divide us instead of unifying us. Give those funds to every tax-paying small business in Pinole. They deserve the courtesy of all receiving equal treatment. Thank you for your time and this time you spent and effort in keeping our city safe.
Next is L. Sheen.
There we go. Is that okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I am addressing the city council on, unfortunately, my ideas got rather shuffled because of things that went before I was able to speak. I was not expecting a vote at this time. I thought this was to examine the situation and to see how we can spend this money in a good way. I would suggest that you look into certain things, not to have research or studies, they cost money, but consider that dealing with COVID is hand in hand with the global warming situation and the fact that they may have not caused one another but made it worse. And I'm looking at some of these dangerously hot days for seniors and for people who are in health distress or problems. I had a program that I heard about, and I just want to mention looking into it because one city was able to lower the temperature by covering the streets with a light gray substance. I can't tell you any more than that, but they were quite successful in lowering the temperature. And 1 or 2 degrees means a lot to somebody who is ill or really old. On to the businesses. I would like to help the businesses. I would start with the mom and pop business. You're talking about a number of employees. There are some places that only have 1 or 2 people. I was in a shop yesterday in Vallejo. 1 person was in this huge shop. She would have needed help if she were here. Mentioning Vallejo, they actually had a voting situation where people went to the library and other places and voted on paper. And they had a list of what possible places money could go, and they were encouraged, I would say nudged, to be sure that everyone voted.
Thank you for those comments. Given that we're about 5 minutes away from 1 o'clock, I want to respect council and staff's time and ask if there would be consensus to extend the meeting for no more than 15 minutes. considering that there might be some public comment, and we also want to kind of wrap up and hear from Mr. Foster or Ms. Meyer and Director Guillory, just like a really quick summary as to what we will be doing next. Thank you.
I'll move we extend the meeting for 15 minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Toms.
Yes.
Noting for the record that Councilmember Murphy is absent. Councilmember Tave.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Salimi.
Yes.
Mayor Martinez Rubin.
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Stone, how many more public comments do you see?
Currently, there are 3.
3?
3. Yes.
3. Thank you. Okay, we'll take those. Thank you. And then that'll be that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Rafael Menace.
Greetings again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I agree with the prior speakers that it would have been beneficial to have these comments before the vote taken by the council. I recognize that the council obviously has the power to take the vote and the motion and to not have public comment in between the motion being made and the vote. But I think that given that this is a workshop, it would have been worthwhile to bend ordinary procedures slightly and allow for public comment before the formal vote was held. With regards to the Brown Act, I think that given the comments that on page 7, both next steps and under the fiscal impact segment where it says once the city council decides on ARPA appropriations, FY 2021/22 operating budget will be amended to incorporate approved expenditures to be funded by the $2,302,505 of ARPA funds received, seems to pretty strongly imply that the council could vote to appropriate funds in this meeting. I agree it could have been stated more clearly, but I don't think that it wasn't stated. It might be worthwhile if the council desires to have another vote on this matter at the next normally scheduled meeting, just to have it be extra clear. But I think it was indicated that a vote was possible at this workshop, even if it wasn't stated as such in the title of the agenda item. And I believe that's all my comments at this time. Thank you.
Anastasia Dotson.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just 2 comments. One, I do support any efforts using this funding to address climate change, and I'm not an expert on how that would be done, but I think that should be at all levels of government. So any and all ideas that are permissible under these funds to address that would be great. Excuse me. Also, I support those gift cards. It seems like it addresses 2 issues to support the citizens and also small businesses. Thank you.
David or Irma report.
Hello?
Yes.
I thank you again for letting me talk one more time. I have listened to what City Attorney Casher has to say, and I did briefly look at item number page 7, but I'd also like him to also look below it, fiscal impact in the first sentence in its entirety, not just the word if on next steps. The onus of what this paragraph says, this workshop does not in itself have any fiscal impact upon the city. So I will talk later in a lengthier letter once I collect my thoughts, but I just want to point out that the titled purpose of this workshop was specifically to get additional community input, and all the hype and talk that was done for the last month and a half, the first and second, did not, until this report was issued, say that the council was specifically going to make suggestions as to what they wanted to do with the money. It's the word "if" can be interpreted in many ways, and I respect your interpretation, but I do disagree, and I will give something later on. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And again, I respect everybody's opinion, although I respectfully disagree. Have a good day.
Madam Mayor, if I can just briefly, just as a point of clarification, typically when there's reference to an item not having any fiscal impact, it's because the funds have already been received and they're already within the city. It's really just an allocation of those funds. So it's not a kind of new expenditure. And so just wanted to clarify, and Markeisha, please correct me if I'm wrong, but typically when we include that language in staff report, it means that there's no new or additional expenditure. This is money that's already kind of within the city's coffers, and it's just an allocation of funding that's already been approved and budgeted. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. Director Guillory, did you wish to add anything?
No, I agree.
Thank you. Okay, so we're at 101, and I would like to ask staff and or our consultants to help us about next steps that we will take, given the comments that we've heard. It seems both among council and from the public and more to be heard, that we will have ample opportunities through the next year to continue having exchanges about how we proceed with allocating funds that are one time and that are from ARPA. A decision that we made tonight, I believe, that the council made, having heard comments and having also been involved with the review of how ARPA funds, how they may be spent, and also recognizing that we want to address what we've been hearing and hearing again about an interest in addressing immediate needs. And our vote reflects that. And also that we aren't pursuing more than that at this point with regard to making decisions, is because we need to have more time to think through, also need more information, and also want to get a sense of how even today's decision and the rollout or the practical aspect of how funds would play out, would actually be used in the hands of small businesses and in the public to some degree. What difference they will make, and we won't see that. We won't have any basis for that until a few months from now. So I don't think we decided, made a rash decision. We have allowed for some flexibility with those funds. We simply identified an area of need that we have heard time and time again. If there is different sense of the adequacy of our decision, of course, I think that's related to how we view the world and how different we may be with regard to what we think ought to be done when and for whom. So, Mr. Foster, can you please let us know about what will be happening next following this workshop as to your role, HDL's role, and your work with staff?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And I'll let the finance director comment a little bit more when I'm done too, but on kind of next steps. But I think you gave some direction today to talk about funding for a pilot e-gift card program. So we will work with staff on trying to move that forward so that we can understand what the structure of the program would be. Talking about the requirements, working with somebody like Gifty and that, and then come back to the city council with that, and then also we can offer some thoughts and ideas on the grant program, taking what you had before, looking at kind of eligibility parameters, guidelines, those kinds of things to make it even more effective. And so we've done this in a few other places, so we have some good examples about how we could apply that, but then also make it specific to fit the needs of Pinole and your small businesses. Looking at categories and types and those kinds of things, I think would be really important. So coming back on those kinds of things. We'll also encourage staff to really engage some of those nonprofits that are doing work in your community with the food bank program and others to try to figure out some of those immediate needs. They've got the relationships, they got the network to understand, as the mayor talked about a number of times, they're really honing in what those immediate needs are for folks that really could use some assistance in the community, whether it's food or insecurity or rental assistance or whatever it is, to really use those established networks, those nonprofits that really have a better understanding about what those needs are in the community. And so I think that would be a logical next step too. And I think the other thing is really to kind of understand what's happening in Washington, D.C. And so really gotta figure out what the recently adopted infrastructure bill is focused on and what that can do to help with a lot of those assessments that you're working on with infrastructure and public works projects and those kinds of things. But then also understand the when and if the flexibility act change to ARPA, what that's going to have in terms of an impact. There's infrastructure could be broadened in those categories too, which could help too. And so there's still some work to be done there to understand that. But I think today in the last workshop and the surveys that we've had and the community survey is still open. We still encourage people to go ahead and complete that. But I think it's all these are tools to really understand, and then along with what the city council is hearing too from the community on what is the best way to use these funds. But they have to be eligible. They have to, so that eligibility is really important because there's the potential. Markeisha talked about there's compliance reports that we're going to help with in terms of some guidance, and there's an annual report that's due at the end of April for small cities, and so showing what you've done, what you've spent your money on, and those kinds of things. And so I think that it's really important to make sure that you are in compliance, because there's a potential audit. Not everybody gets audited, but if you're one of those lucky few that gets audited, you want to make sure that you're doing it right, and the things that you're funding are eligible and appropriate, and you can make those findings. I think kind of all that makes great sense. So I think you took some steps today. You heard from people, you got comments, you shaped those, offered up some guidance in terms of the e-gift card program, the small business grant program. I think those are nice steps, but then kind of look at some of those other kinds of immediate needs in the community and track possible legislative changes.
Thank you. Director Guillory?
I think that pretty much sums it up, but I would like to echo Barry's comments. I think that we're starting with addressing the immediate needs based on the motion that was passed for the pilot e-gift card program, and then also expanding the business assistance program. But before rolling that out, defining the criteria. And I believe there was a request for the form to go through the city council for review before we roll that out. So we would have that. As Barry mentioned, there's a number of legislative changes that are happening, so staying abreast of that. And then just, we'll have many more conversations around this in the form of regular council meetings and potentially additional workshops to discuss this more in the coming months, especially with the plans that are rolling out, the economic development strategy and the needs assessments. And then also just to remind everyone, we do have a community and engagement plan that is being worked on too. So I think that'll help us address some of the engagement issues that we need to address. So just wanted to remind everyone that is also happening.
Yes, and nature allowing, and
health
conditions allowing, yes, that we would be able to carry out those engagement opportunities in person, whatever format that takes. So more to look forward to, and certainly we welcome the input and the challenges that we're facing together to try to make some informed decisions to the extent that we have information, and also working through the uncertainty, because I think that will always be present no matter how many surveys we administer, no matter how many opportunities for engagement there will be. So I want to thank everyone for your participation, and our consultants, Ms. Foster and Mr. Foster and Ms. Meyer, and staff, Director Guillory, thank you for everything, and as well, City Attorney Casher for clarifying to us that we continue proceeding within what are legal requirements for your elected officials to follow. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of Saturday and stay well.
You too. Thank you.
I'm adjourning until the next regular City Council meeting of November 16th. Be well.